Chapter 228. In the hall, Wu-Ming sat casually on the sofa and quietly waited for the guest in front of him to speak. The guest seemed to want Wu-Ming to speak first, so he didn't speak. Wu-Ming yawned casually and continued to be silent. As if admitting defeat, the guest spoke. "The disobedient king, you know about the arrival of the last king, right?" Yarrick couldn't bear the silence and spoke first. Since the other party had spoken, Wu-Ming didn't hide it. "I know, or rather, I plan the arrival of the last king." In an instant, Yarrick's look at Wu-Ming changed. From a guy he could barely work with to a complete enemy. Wu-Ming saw the look in Yarrick's eyes, or rather, from the beginning, Wu-Ming saw that Yarrick was rejecting him, so Wu-Ming mocked Yarrick. "In any case, the final king will definitely descend. I merely brought forward the time of his descent." Listening to Wu-Ming's nonchalant speech, Yarrick frowned. "Do you know how severe the disaster caused by the last king is? You dare to summon the last king to the ground ahead of time." Although Yarrick wasn't a good person, he couldn't watch the world suffer, and this was also due to Yarrick's good upbringing. "Of course I know, and the reason I let him descend is to defeat the last king, to defeat him completely." Wu-Ming meant that he wanted to completely eliminate the last king to prevent him from coming again in the future. After all, Yarrick had read in the records that the last king came more than once, and every time he came he would disappear after killing all the demon kings, and the disaster on the earth would stop. Wu-Ming's idea was correct, but do you really have the ability to completely eliminate the last king, Vilo-Thranst? Yarrick called out Wu-Ming's disobedient name. "Don't think that you can kill the last king just because you're a god." Wu-Ming scoffed at Yarrick's mockery. "You came to find me after meeting the last king, right?" Wu-Ming asked. Wu-Ming had received news from Guinevere that the Black Prince Yarrick had witnessed the resurrection of the last king and had escaped after being injured by the last king. Yarrick was defeated by the last king, so he came back to Wu-Ming. This was Wu-Ming's guess. "So what?" Yarrick frowned. "Then let me give you a word of advice. Don't judge others based on your own standards." What he meant was, you are weak, but don't think of others as weak. I carried out this series of plans in order to defeat the last king. Since the other side was so confident, Yarrick didn't say anything else. Then, resisting the urge to leave, Yarrick spoke again. "Since that's the case, you must know about the Ancient Covenant." The Ancient Covenant was the special authority that only a small number of steel had, as Sun Wukong, the great sage equal to heaven, had said. Wu-Ming nodded. "The last king must have the authority of the Ancient Covenant. I thought of a way to weaken his power." When Yarrick said this, Wu-Ming also thought of something. That was, since the Ancient Covenant is the power to multiply the number of God Slayers, then if there is only one God Slayer left, then the Ancient Covenant will be useless. Engage in civil war to reduce the number of God Slayers. This was the idea that Yarrick and Wu-Ming came up with. "Since you are so confident in yourself, do you want to try this method?" Yarrick looked at Wu-Ming cautiously. In response, Wu-Ming smiled. "I have to say this method is indeed very effective. However, I don't think the last king's strength lies in the Ancient Covenant. The last king had the Ancient Covenant to increase his power, but Wu-Ming didn't believe that Sun Wukong, who wasn't the last king, would have the Ancient Covenant. The last king was called the last king because he had the power to resist the last king. So, I reject your suggestion." Wu-Ming looked into Yarrick's eyes and said firmly. "You can try to communicate with the other God Slayers and engage in civil war among the demon kings. I accept that you can attack me at any time, but..." Wu-Ming sat up straight and looked at Yarrick. "Do it as soon as possible. Otherwise the last king will be defeated by me." Then Wu-Ming leaned on the sofa and closed his eyes. Yarrick narrowed his eyes, thinking about something. Then he turned into a lightning bolt and left Wu-Ming's mansion. Wu-Ming, who was sitting on the sofa with his eyes closed, said without turning his head. "Sebastian." "Yes." The old man named Sebastian appeared behind Wu-Ming. "Did Satya successfully escape from John's pursuit?" Wu-Ming asked. "Yes, Wu-Ming-sama. With my help, Satya has escaped from the pursuit of the American God Slayer John Pluto Smith and came to Japan. At this moment, Satya is guarding Angela in the cave behind the mansion." After listening to Sebastian's words, Wu-Ming felt a little helpless. In fact, Wu-Ming asked Satya to capture Angela a long time ago. After all, the only snake that had nothing to do with him was the American god, Angela. Wu-Ming's original intention was to use Angela as a primer to stimulate the appearance of the last king, but he didn't expect that America's God Slayer, John Pluto Smith, would be so difficult to deal with that Zaisha couldn't safely bring Angela to Japan. In the end, Wu-Ming chose to use himself and Athena as a catalyst. Although the effect wasn't good, the final result was good. and the last king was revived. Now, Angela was useless and Wu Ming wasn't someone who would kill easily, but he couldn't just let Angela go. After all, that guy had done a lot of bad things. Keep him as a pet. Incidentally, Angela's true form was a 50-meter-long demonic snake, Leviathan the snake god. Let Satya bring Angela here, we don't need to watch her for the time being. Yes, I'll contact Satya. Sebastian stepped aside and began to contact Satya. After about a few seconds, a black and red portal appeared in front of Wu Ming. Zaisha walked out gracefully with a submissive little loli following behind her. If he was not mistaken, this should be Angela. Long time no see, Lord Wu Ming. I've missed you. Satya was infatuated with him as soon as she arrived. However, Wu Ming didn't pay attention to Satya but to the lowly Angela behind her. The reason why Wu Ming paid attention to Angela was because she was naked. That's right, there were only a few bandages wrapped around her petite body, which was even more seductive than being completely naked. Ahem, why don't you find her some clothes, Satya? Wu Ming turned his head slightly and asked. This has nothing to do with me, Lord Wu Ming. She was the one who insisted on not wearing clothes. I don't want Lord Wu Ming's noble eyes to look at other women's bodies. Satya bit a handkerchief that she took out from somewhere with an unwilling expression. After all, Wu Ming had told her not to hurt Angela, so Satya couldn't do anything to her and could only threaten her verbally. Then Wu Ming took out a white robe from the golden ripples and threw it to Angela. Put it on. To Satya's surprise, Angela was actually obedient and obediently put on the white robe. After all, Angela was particularly stubborn when it came to wearing clothes. Even if Angela was afraid of Satya, she wouldn't give in on wearing clothes. At this time, as if she saw Satya's doubts, Angela spoke. Because Sama is both steel and snake. Chapter 229. Angela stared at Wu Ming without blinking. Listening to Angela's words, Wu Ming couldn't help but remember the definition of steel and snake. Steel was born from serpents and serpents were closely related to the earth. Whether it was the great sage equal to heaven, Sun Wukong, Perseus, or Neza, they were all related to the earth or the mother goddess of the earth. Sun Wukong was born from the earth and was a stubborn rock. Perseus was entrusted by Athena to kill Medusa. After receiving a series of help from Athena, Perseus successfully became a hero and married the princess. Although Neza was born with mortal flesh, he later cut his bones to return to his father and flesh to his mother. After his death, his master used the lotus root to reshape his physical body. Be it growing with the land or reshaping, forging, it was a trait of the god of steel. Although the god of steel was the archenemy of Dragon Snake, the god of steel was also the guardian of Dragon Snake, not to mention Wu Ming, who was both the god of steel and Dragon Snake. Steel and serpent were of the same origin. Wu Ming, who had dual attributes, was the true guardian of dragon and serpent. Since that's the case, why don't you stay by my side? Wu Ming asked rather cordially. But no matter how he looked at it, he looked like a kidnapper. Okay. Angela nodded her little head. Ah. That detestable little bastard actually managed to obtain the favor of Lord Wu Ming. I'm so jealous. Xiataya bit her handkerchief hard as she screamed in her heart. Although Wu Ming didn't have the ability to read minds, he could still guess some things based on Xiataya's behavior. Wu Ming coughed and began to issue orders. Ahem. Satya, you've done well this time. You've successfully brought Angela to me in one piece. Don't mention it. This is what I should do. Seeing that Wu Ming's expression had turned serious, Satya also regained her composure and answered Wu Ming. Very good. I now have a new mission for you and Sebastian. Yes, Lord Wu Ming. Please give me your orders. When Sebastian heard Wu Ming calling for him, he knelt on one knee with Satya and waited for Wu Ming's orders. The arrival of the last king may be accompanied by the arrival of other gods. When the time comes, act according to the circumstances. Yes, Lord Wu Ming. Zaisha and Sebas received the order. It was not because Wu Ming was afraid or anything else. After all, the last king was not weak. Even if Wu Ming was very confident that he could defeat the last king, it was actually because he was confident in himself. After all, Wu Ming hadn't seen the last king's strength yet. Wu Ming wasn't 100% sure that he could defeat the last king, but he still had to maintain his confidence. Then Angela, you can stay here for now. Remember, don't run around and stay here obediently. Your senior, Snake, is still in this house, so you have to get along well with her. As if he was talking to a child, Wu Ming reminded Angela. Yes, Angela knows. Angela nodded like a child. This made Satya, who was at the side, unwilling to give up. She took out a handkerchief from who knows where and bit it. Lord Wuming, she's lying to you. You don't know how arrogant this little girl is. After Satya caught Angela in the United States, she brought her to hide everywhere. There was no other way. The American God Slayer, John Pluto Smith, was too difficult to deal with. Satya was not afraid of him, but Angela was not. When Satya found Angela, she was resurrected by a cult magic society and was extremely weak. Not to mention the God Slayer, even a magician who knew some offensive magic could kill Angela. Therefore, Satya took Angela to hide everywhere. During this period, Angela was like a raging loli. Although she was very afraid of Satya, she had already done certain things her own way, such as wearing clothes. Seeing Angela being so obedient in front of Wuming, Satya really wanted to slap her in the face. After settling Angela down, Wuming took Satya and Sebastian out of the house. However, Wuming did not notice that when they went out, a figure slipped out of the window of the room upstairs. Feeling the apocalyptic magic in the air, Wuming looked for the last king. Wuming looked at the changes around him and felt endless emotions. The flowers, plants, and trees on the ground began to gradually wither, especially the places close to the apocalyptic aura. It could be said that they were almost all withered. The barren earth began to crack, creating one fissure after another. The temperature of the ground gradually increased, and all the rivers and lakes on the ground gradually disappeared. With his good eyesight, Wuming saw that the sea level was falling bit by bit. The originally snow-white Mount Fuji also began to emit thick black smoke. Is the ground starting to heat up? Wuming frowned. This was not a good sign. It seems that no matter what, I have to defeat the last king as soon as possible. Wuming began to regret summoning the last king without making too much preparations. The price was too heavy for Earth. Then there was only one thing he could do now, and that was to seize the time to defeat the last king. Then Wuming took Satya and Sebastian to a beach. This was the place where the apocalyptic aura was the strongest. Guinevere, Lancelot, and a weary young man stood together with a masked figure wrapped in bandages. The weary young man held a holy sword similar to Excalibur in his hand. Wuming believed that this sword and Excalibur were twins. That should be the divine blade of salvation. Wuming had heard from Guinevere that the last king's weapon was the sword of salvation, a divine sword that could release the thunder of salvation. Obviously, the young man holding the sword of salvation was the last king. As for the bandaged man, Wuming guessed that it was very likely that he was summoned by the last king. In fact, Wuming's guess was right. The bandaged man was here to help the last king. Guinevere looked at Wuming worriedly, but Wuming could see that Guinevere was a little uneasy about him. Lancelot was still in full armor and his appearance could not be seen. My compatriot, it seems that you are not a god of this world. The last king spoke. As expected of the last king, he could tell at a glance that Wuming was not a native of this world. However, you are indeed vilo-theranced. Just as Wuming was about to say something, the last king spoke again. Wuming keenly noticed that the trace of uneasiness in Guinevere's eyes had disappeared. In an instant, Wuming seemed to understand. Then, my compatriot, my old enemy, let us quickly begin the slaughter. I can't stay on the ground for too long. You know yourself well, Wuming said. Chapter 230. Wuming knew what the last king meant by, I can't stay on the ground for too long. The last king also knew that as long as he stayed on the ground, he would cause global destruction to the earth. It could be seen from the chaos of spiritual veins all over the world that the last king brought about a global disaster. Of course, I tried very hard to avoid coming to the ground. When the last king said that sentence, Wuming seemed to think of something. Is that why the dragon snake attribute can't wake you up from the myth? Wuming said to himself. Wuming now understood why a series of methods couldn't summon the last king to the ground. That was because the last king was avoiding appearing, or rather, he was avoiding appearing. When there were 6 gods layers and 1 demigod on the ground, the last king had already awakened, but he didn't reach the upper limit of the last king's awakening, so the last king endured and didn't appear in the myth. When Wuming and Athena fought, although their dragon snake attribute also stimulated the last king, it was still a little short of the upper limit, so the last king didn't appear in the world. When Guinevere found the place where the last king slept, Guinevere chose the simplest, most violent and most effective way, which was to summon the last king directly to the ground. That was what the last king couldn't resist, so the last king showed up, showing an extremely tired face. As you can see, King of Disobedience, as long as I stay in this world for a moment longer, the world will be destroyed because of me. Steel was born from the earth, so naturally, it could absorb the power of the earth. The great sage, Sun Wukong, could find spiritual veins to restore his power when his power was incomplete, so there was no reason why the last king couldn't. You must know about the Ancient Covenant, right? The last king suddenly asked. In fact, the Ancient Covenant was created for me, and what I hold is the most orthodox Ancient Covenant. Could it be? Wu Ming thought of a possibility. Yes, as long as there are multiple gods layers on the ground, my power will increase. As if to verify the last king's words, the magical power in the last king's body began to rise sharply. It instantly surpassed the total amount of magic power of Guinevere, Lancelot, and the bandaged man. Even Wu Ming, who had almost unlimited mana, was shocked. Now, Wu Ming had to admit that the last king was probably the strongest enemy he had ever faced. Then the last king raised the platinum blade in his hand. If you and the others had killed all the other gods' lairs before coming here, you might still have a chance of winning. Unfortunately, the platinum blade began to gather energy, and a small platinum ball began to gather at the tip of the platinum blade. You've already lost. In an instant, the platinum energy ball shot towards Wu Ming. Boom! A violent explosion occurred where Wu Ming and the others were standing. Dust covered everything. Guinevere looked on worriedly, but because of their different standpoints, Guinevere and Wu Ming were now enemies, so Guinevere didn't do anything. A breeze blew and the smoke was blown away, revealing Wu Ming and the others. Wu Ming stretched out his hand, and a shield-like armor with 7 purple petals appeared in front of him. Obviously, it was the armor that blocked the last king's attack. 7 blazing rings, Roajax. Wu Ming slowly said the name of the noble phantasm. That was the pseudo-noble phantasm that Wu Ming created with Create Green item. This was the noble phantasm that Wu Ming had learned from Wei Gong Shiro after his heroic spirit transformation. During the Trojan War, the bronze shield that was wrapped in 7 layers of cowhide was used to block the javelin of the hero Hector. Just like the rule breaker, it was a noble relic that was obtained after the sublimation of the anecdote. It was said that each petal was comparable to an ancient city wall. Crack. The Roajax in front of Wu Ming shattered. After all, it was only a replica and the last king's attack wasn't that easy to defend against. Naturally, the Roajax broke as well. Noble phantasm? The last king frowned. I'm sorry, but the last king may have to disappoint you. While speaking, Wu Ming took out X silver from the golden ripple. Then Wu Ming raised his right hand holding X silver and used Create Green item again. Golden particles gathered on Wu Ming's sword, changing the shape of X silver, and the original silver-white sword became golden. Unfortunately, I think I have a good chance of winning. What's that? Guinevere, Lancelot and the rest were shocked when they saw the sacred sword in Wu Ming's hand. That was because the sacred sword in Wu Ming's hand was too similar to the last king's divine sword of salvation. Countless rays of light began to gather on the sacred sword in Wu Ming's hand. Then Wu Ming used the true name of the noble phantasm with both hands. Excalibur, Excalibur. Wu Ming swung his sword down heavily. Oh no. Lancelot immediately carried Guinevere and rode away on his white horse. Bandage Man also jumped lightly and the wind carried him away. The last king did not move, and he looked at the golden torrent tiredly. The golden magical torrent rushed towards the last king, and the light and heat continued to attack him. In this world, Wu Ming, who had the identity of King Arthur, had the right to use the Excalibur. Silent Cry successfully used the Create Great item and X Silver to create the Excalibur. A moment later, Wu Ming stopped using the noble phantasm and swung the sword. Wu Ming looked at the ground in front of him that looked like it had suffered a natural disaster. Lancelot, who had escaped earlier, carried Guinevere and stood aside. Bandage Man was floating in the sky with the wind, and the few of them looked at the scene caused by Wu Ming's attack. The land had been plowed once again, but a shield had appeared where the last king had been standing. The last king was holding an ancient shield, blocking Wu Ming's noble phantasm. Even the ground behind the last king was defended by the last king, which created a strange phenomenon. On the dilapidated ground, with the last king as the starting point, the ground behind him was still intact. After all, the last king had stayed there for a long time, and it had caused the ground to deteriorate. It looked intact on the surface, but there was no vitality inside. Wu Ming had seen the shield that blocked the attack of the Excalibur not long ago. Aegis Shield, Wu Ming said the shield's real name. Yes, it was the same shield that Athena used during the battle between Wu Ming and Athena. Upon closer inspection, the shield looked exactly the same as Athena's shield, except for the lack of Medusa's head. Therefore this shield should be called the Aegis. You are indeed the legendary King Arthur of Britain. You are right, this shield is Aegis. The last king's voice came from behind the shield. Chapter 231. The last king revealed himself and looked at Wu Ming. Then, a grid similar to the Manchala formation appeared behind the last king. The last king placed Aegis on one of the grids. However, the moment Aegis touched the Manchala formation, the shield turned into nothingness. Then, the Manchala formation disappeared. This shield is really Aegis, the last king said again. But I'm a little confused. Why can you use Aegis? Wu Ming began to suspect the last king's identity and guessed his real name. After all, not everyone could use Aegis. I'm sorry, but I have no comment, the last king said quietly. Let's end this quickly. With that, the last king charged at Wu Ming with his divine sword. Wu Ming was not to be outdone either. He charged at the last king with his divine sword. The two began the most primitive hand-to-hand combat. Bandage Man, who was floating in the sky, saw the last king and Wu Ming fighting. He wanted to go up and help the last king, but, boom! A blazing flame rushed at Bandage Man with a sound that broke through the sound barrier. Bandage Man hurriedly used the wind to block it. I can't let you disturb Lord Wu Ming. Satya was fully armed and wore a magenta full-body armor. She held a pike in her right hand and maintained the traces of a magic formation in her left hand. She smiled at Bandage Man, then I'll kill you first. With that, Bandage Man charged at Satya. Ah. Then come and try. Let's see if you can kill me, Nasrik's strongest one-on-one combat power. With that, Satya charged at Bandage Man as well. On the other side, Guinevere and Lancelot. Lancelot put Guinevere down as he spoke. Although I've already made a contract with my lord, now is not the time for the contract to be established. I still have an obligation to help my lord. Then Lancelot looked at the confused Guinevere. You've been demoted to godly ancestor. Don't get involved in battles that you can't participate in. In fact, Lancelot didn't want Guinevere to be entangled with the last king and Wu Ming, which was why he told Guinevere to stay here. After all, even though Guinevere had been demoted to a godly ancestor, he was still very powerful. After all, the godly ancestor of the United States, Angela, was able to fight with the American godly slayer, John Pluto Smith, and was defeated by John in the end. However, Angela had proven the power of a godly ancestor. Then Lancelot galloped over on his horse. Uncle. Guinevere looked at Lancelot's departing figure and began to recall. In fact, before Wu Ming arrived, Guinevere and Lancelot had already noticed that the last king was exhausted from the battle. Therefore they took the opportunity to inform the last king of their thoughts. Guinevere recalled his conversation with the last king. I see. Do you two want to enter King Arthur's myth? The last king said. Guinevere and Lancelot were a little uneasy at the moment. After all, in the eyes of some strict monarchs, this was considered betrayal. Actually, you don't have to ask me. The last king seemed to see their concerns and comforted them. We are not monarchs and subjects, we are just partners walking on the same path. That's right, although Guinevere and Lancelot kept calling each other master and my lord, the three of them were just partners. Moreover, you are indeed Guinevere and Lancelot now. It's normal for you to want to return to the monarch you truly serve. The last king said calmly. However, this agreement still needs to be fulfilled. The last king said again. If I kill him, then you will have no one to serve. Look forward to him killing me, Guinevere, Lancelot. After that, the last king didn't say anything. The timeline turned to the present. Guinevere returned to his senses and looked at Lancelot, who was about to go to support Lancelot. Uncle, you are right. No matter what happens in the future, I am still his lordship's maidservant. I will fight for his lordship. What was loyalty? Guinevere finally chose loyalty between loyalty and love. He wanted to be loyal to the very end. I can't let you disturb his battle, God's ancestor. Guinevere turned his head and looked at the source of the voice. A girl wearing a Greek off-shoulder dress and a garland on her head came over. You are Lord Athena. Yes, that girl was the ancient mother goddess Athena who once again restored her Trinity true body. Because Wu Ming left the Gorgon stone on the table and specifically told Athena, Athena took advantage of Wu Ming's absence and quietly followed him. In fact, Wu Ming left the Gorgon stone so that Athena could protect herself. After all, Athena had just been severely injured by Wu Ming. Are you going to stop me, Lord Athena? Guinevere looked at the approaching Athena and asked. Can't help it. I'm already his subordinate god. If my master god is in trouble, of course I will help him. Athena's serpentine eyes flashed. Didn't you just lose to Lord Villo? You must be very weak now. Guinevere asked. You don't have to worry about that. Athena licked her lips and smiled seductively. I am confident that I can stall you, who has been demoted from Earth Mother to God's ancestor. Is that so? Guinevere took a deep breath. Then you are Guinevere's enemy. The battle was about to begin. When Lancelot rode his white horse toward the last king in Wooming, he suddenly stopped. An old man came straight in front of him. Snake? Lancelot felt the urge to kill the enemy as a steel blade. Nice to meet you, you are Lancelot, right? My name is Sebastian Dean, Wooming Sama's subordinate. I'm sorry to say that you can't pass through here. Sebastian bowed and said politely. Then you shall be my opponent, Snake. Silent Cry and the last king fought back and forth, sword chi flying and mana radiating in all directions, constantly destroying the land that had already been destroyed once. As expected of King Arthur's strongest knight, Vilo-Thranst, a man with great martial arts skills. Wooming also praised. It's the same for you. I can feel that your martial arts skills have been honed through experience. However, there was one thing that Wooming didn't say, that was, Wooming felt a kind of king spirit. Chapter 232. Wooming was chatting with the last king, trying to find the last king's weakness through the conversation. Indeed, I've gone through hardships that ordinary people can't go through. In reality, it's my own choice. Your own choice. Wooming analyzed secretly. So, disobedient king, do you know why I'm called the last king and why I'm called the hero? Wooming narrowed his eyes when he heard what the last king said. That was the question that Wooming was thinking about earlier. Indeed, the last king was the existence that killed all the demon kings on the ground. In that case, the last king must be extremely powerful. However, that was unrealistic. Wooming did not believe that the last king could kill all the god slayers that had died since ancient times by relying on his martial arts alone. If that were the case, the last king would not be a threat at all. Wooming would have killed him long ago. After all, the last king must be a disobedient god. There was no god that was invincible in mythology. Even those who were close to being invincible had a fatal weakness. That was fixed. Wooming speculated that the last king had a special item or skill. The ancient covenant was a special skill. As long as there were god slayers on the ground, the ancient covenant would work. It would give the hero, the last king, the number of god slayers, a multiplier. However, merely increasing the last king's ability did not mean that he would be able to kill any god slayers. Wooming had a bold guess based on the fact that the last king had used the Aegis that not everyone could use and the Manchala formation that appeared behind the last king when he stored the Aegis. You have all the god relics that the gods have given you. Wooming looked at the last king firmly and answered the last king's question. The last king smiled in response to Wooming's guess. You're right. With that, the Manchala phalanx once again appeared behind the last king. Immediately after, every grid in the Manchala square formation shone with a golden light. Under the golden glow, Wooming could clearly see all sorts of god relics of all shapes and sizes being stored in the Manchala formation. Wooming could not help but narrow his eyes. The gods created the position of the last king. In order for the last king to kill any of the god slayers, the gods gave their god relics to the last king. The god relics in the Manchala formation began to glow one after another as if they were following the last king's words. And because of that, I became an existence that could kill any god slayer, the last king said emotionlessly. After all, the authority that the god slayers seized came from the gods, and the gods all had their own weaknesses. These weaknesses were exploited by the god slayers, causing the god slayers to kill the gods and turn their human bodies into god slayers. However, at the same time, the god slayers who obtained the authority of the gods they killed would also obtain the gods' weaknesses. Just like when Wooming was facing Perseus, he wanted to seal Wooming's authority with the light of Mitra, the master of Welslana. However, Wooming's authority was no longer Welslana's authority. Welslana's authority was combined with Meker's authority. After the elevation of Welslana's authority through Meker's relic, the god's authority had successfully turned into Wooming's relic, the 12 clones. Therefore, Perseus could not seal Wooming's authority. Meanwhile, the last king who possessed the god relics that could target all the gods' weaknesses became an existence that could suppress all the gods' layers and kill them. This is one of my biggest trump cards as the last king, the last king said calmly. The last king has obtained the gate of Babylon in disguise. Wooming could not help but grumble to himself. After all, Gilgamesh's gate of Babylon had the prototype of all the relics. All in all, the last king's Manchala square was even more of a cheat than Gilgamesh's gate of Babylon. The Manchala square had all the god relics. However, there were no items that were not God's weapons in the Manchala square. Like the 7 rings of burning sky, Roajax, and Rule Breaker Talisman Rule Breaker. There were no noble phantoms in the Manchala formation behind the last king. Unfortunately, I don't think you're invincible, Wu Ming said as he stood opposite the last king with the golden sword in his hand. As mentioned earlier, the last king was also the god of disobedience. As long as it was the god of disobedience, it would definitely have a weakness. Even Wu Ming had a weakness. You're right. I'm not invincible. The last king did not beat around the bush and admitted it generously. I was killed by the ancient god's layers. However, after I recovered my strength in this divine sword, I reappeared in the human world and killed the god's layers who killed me once. Moreover, I've never been so confident before. The last king closed his tired eyes as if he was reminiscing. During the ancient times, the god's layers killed the last king when he was still weak before he recovered his strength, turning him into a divine sword. Now, the reason why the last king was at his strongest as soon as he was born was all thanks to Guinevere and Lancelot. Take Sun Wukong for example. When he was released, he had to find a spiritual vein to recover his strength because of the lack of mana. The reason why the last king did not need to be like Sun Wukong was because he was the strongest steel and also because of the holy grail created by Guinevere. As the strongest steel, the last king could absorb the essence of the earth for his own use as long as he stood on the ground. This was also why the earth began to lose its vitality after the last king descended. Flowers and plants withered, trees died, cracks appeared in the earth, oceans evaporated and volcanoes began to stir. This was all because the last king had absorbed the essence of the earth. However, the most important thing was the Holy Grail created by Guinevere. The Holy Grail was an existence that provided the last king with abundant mana when he descended. In the past he was revived with full health. Now he was revived with full health and mana. The two symbolized different things. In addition, because he was absorbing the essence of the earth, his vitality and mana were constantly recovering, making him stronger all the time. This was the reason why the last king was so confident. Moreover, the god of disobedience is only a projection of God on the earth. Even if I die once, I can continue to be a projection the next time. That's unfortunate, the last king. Wu Ming looked at the last king with a smile and continued. I came to this world in my true form. The last king narrowed his eyes. What Wu Ming meant was obvious. As long as he killed Wu Ming, he would not be revived. Well then, let me experience the power of the god relics that the gods have given me. Chapter 233. Wu Ming put down the holy sword as soon as he was done speaking. The holy sword was engulfed by the golden ripple. Subsequently, Wu Ming placed his hand in the golden ripple. Subsequently, the last king put down the savior sword as if he was responding to Wu Ming. A glow appeared in the Manchala formation behind him. Subsequently, countless god relics shot towards Wu Ming like bullets. Wu Ming analyzed the magic contained in the god relics. The last king was using the power of the god relics to cause explosive damage to the enemy. Wu Ming could not help but smile as he watched the familiar scene. My disciple has used this technique before. As her master, it's completely useless to me. Seeing that countless god relics were about to shoot towards Wu Ming, a series of golden ripples appeared behind Wu Ming. Walla walla. Countless golden chains whizzed out of the golden ripples with clanking sounds. The Enkidu had a special effect on divinity. Given that the Enkidu had evolved, it could fight the god relics of the gods and Buddhas in the sky. It could even suppress them slightly. Bang, bang, bang. Countless god relics collided with the golden chains, causing a series of large-scale explosions. Boom, boom, boom. The dust created by the intense explosions drowned each other. Wu Ming waved his hand and a magical wind blew the dust away, revealing the last king who was frowning. What do you think, last king? Do you still want to try? Wu Ming smirked slowly as he looked at the last king. The last king did not say anything. Instead, he used his actions to prove himself. Since the god relics did not work on Lin Huang, he would use the god relics to fight Lin Huang. That was what the last king thought. A glow appeared in one of the Manchala formation behind the last king. Subsequently, a golden longbow appeared in the last king's hand. The last king drew the bow and 9 illusory flame arrows appeared on the golden longbow. Hoi Bao. As the last king shouted the god relic's real name, the 9 arrows that could shoot down the sun were shot towards Wu Ming. Wu Ming did not panic. He extended his hand and a gigantic ancient stone bow appeared in Wu Ming's hand. Wu Ming pulled the stone bow into a full moon and shouted the relic's real name. 9 lives, kill 100 monsters. Wu Ming, who had analyzed the Berserker's Hercules class card, would naturally use Hercules' noble phantasm to kill hundreds of heroic spirits. After all the information of the heroic spirits were stored in the class card. Meanwhile, Wu Ming used the create green item to bring the relic back to the world. Although Hercules was a berserker, the kill 100 spirits was a bow relic. However, with the help of the great hero Hercules' skill, it was transformed into a cold weapon relic. With Wu Ming's skill, it was naturally possible for him to transform it. Moreover, by using the bow to kill hundreds of 9 lives, the damage of the noble relic had increased by quite a bit. As the pseudo-relic's real name was released, the 9 demigod arrows that killed the giant venomous snake Hydra collided with the 9 sunset arrows that were shot out from the Ho-E bow. Boom! The 9 flame arrows collided with the 9 divine arrows, creating an intense explosion. Subsequently, the giant bow in Wu Ming's hand shattered. The last king frowned and put the Ho-E bow away. He then took out another god relic from the Manchala formation. It was a javelin that shone like a meteor. Gungnir. The last king shouted the javelin's name. The javelin was like a meteor, piercing through the atmosphere and shooting toward Wu Ming. Immediately, the create green item light appeared in Wu Ming's palm. Wu Ming condensed the relic, and a scarlet spear appeared in Wu Ming's hand. Gibalg. The scarlet devil spear shot out explosively. The god king's spear that would definitely hit the enemy and the demonic spear that would definitely hit the enemy's heart collided. The 2 weapons collided, creating sparks, and then returned to the hands of the last king and Wu Ming. Gibalg shattered when it returned to Wu Ming's hand, and the Gungnir was firmly grasped by the last king. You always make the first move. This time it's my turn. With that said, Wu Ming put his palms together and activated create green item. A large amount of magical power burst out of Wu Ming's body. The last king looked at Wu Ming vigilantly. The magical power that Wu Ming exuded was comparable to the magical power of a god slayer. Then a long red rod with a golden gauntlet appeared in Wu Ming's hand. That's Enuma. The last king revealed the true name of this weapon because the last king's Manchala phalanx also had this weapon. Although the Enuma Elish that Wu Ming took out was different from the Enuma Elish in the last king's memory, there was no doubt that it was the world sword that recreated the scene of hell before the world was created, Enuma Elish. If that's the case, I'll take it out as well. The Manchala formation behind the last king shone brightly as he spoke. A weapon similar to Enuma Elish with a golden gauntlet and a red rod appeared in the last king's hand. It happened to verify Wu Ming's speculation. Since the Savior Divine Sword was so similar to the Excalibur, perhaps all the relics in the Shinua world had the same appearance and ability as all the god relics in this world. However, I don't believe that you can fully unleash the power of these god relics, the last king. That was right. Even the gods had their own selfish motives. Although the gods and Buddhas had given their god relics to the last king, including the Enuma Elish level god relics, there must be a limit to these god relics. Have you noticed? The last king secretly frowned. In reality, Wu Ming was right. Just like how the god of disobedience's manifestation had a restriction to weaken its power, the last king could not master these god relics at all. He was only in a superficial state. In other words, he was a layman. However, it was the same for Wu Ming. Although Wu Ming could create the god relics that he knew using create green item, Wu Ming was just like the last king. He was a layman and could only use them simply. However, even if a layman was given a gun, he could kill someone. If a layman was given a mobile machine gun array that could be activated with just a button, he would be able to kill almost everyone. That was the reason why the last king said that these god relics were his trump cards. If he did not have the ability to resist or dodge the god relics earlier, he would not have been able to withstand the god relics barrage with his body alone. After snapping back to his senses, Wu Ming lifted Enuma Elish and pointed it at the last king, revealing the real name of the god relic. At that moment, the last king shouted the god relic's name. Enuma Elish, Heaven and Earth Distortion, Star of Creation. Enuma Elish. Almost at the same time, 2 red hurricanes that tore through space collided. Chapter 234. As the red storm collided with each other, the space around them shattered like pieces of glass. Within the void fault created by the space shattering, there was only darkness. In the dark, some dark matter could be seen vaguely. When he saw the dark matter, Wu Ming's inner alarm went off. And it was also because of this warning that Wu Ming realized that he was a little addicted to the battle just now. Although it didn't affect him much, Wu Ming didn't like to be controlled by impulse. This is considered a blessing in disguise. Wu Ming thought to himself. At the same time, Wuming and the last king stopped using the Enuma Elish sword. Soon the broken space recovered bit by bit. The Enuma Elish sword in Wuming's hand shattered and disappeared. Although Wuming could create an Enuma Elish sword that could not be replicated, the sword could only be used as a one-time missile. If he wanted to use it again, he would have to create a new one. Moreover, the mana required to create an Enuma Elish sword was thousands of times more than the mana required to create other relics. Fortunately, Wuming had studied the Enuma Elish sword from Gilgamesh when he was in Uruk. He was only able to create it with the help of Kalas. Needless to say, the magic costume that Zelik made for Wuming was perfect for Wuming. If he could create it a few more times, Wuming might not need Kalas's help anymore. However, since Wuming had only created it once, he could not replicate it. As the topic changed, Wuming recalled the dark matter that he had seen earlier. I can't be wrong. The dark matter is the same as the black mud that Julian used. At this moment, the last king who had put away the Enuma Elish sword spoke. It seems like there's something outside this world. You should know about it since you're from another world. Wuming frowned and thought about it. Then he shook his head. I don't really know what it is. I only know that it's dangerous. After all, Wuming had no idea what it was that had the same aura as Wuming. Looking at Wuming's serious face, the last king chose to believe what Wuming said. It seems like as long as we don't open the space from the outside world, they won't be able to affect this world. That's true, but who knows if the darkness will find a way to come into this world. After all, Aria's heart had been corroded by the darkness, and he had completely fallen to the dark side. Moreover, you and I have already opened the tunnel, earlier. Wuming meant that the dark matter might have already come to this world. Is that so? But it's a pity that I don't want to get involved in this mess anymore. The reason why humans can slay gods and become god slayers that are neither human nor god is because humans have unlimited possibilities. The calamities of this era will be left to the people of this era to resist. I will only do one thing, and that is to kill you demon kings that shouldn't exist in this world, then quickly go into hibernation. With that, the last king raised the sword of salvation. Wuming also agreed with the last king's words about humans have infinite possibilities, and the disaster of this era should be resisted by the people of this era. Moreover, even if the last king wanted to stay on the ground to protect humans, Wuming would not allow it. As long as the last king stood on the ground, it wouldn't take long for the entire earth to fall into desolation until it became a dead planet. Strange, the last king. As a disobedient god and the strongest god of steel, you hate fighting so much. Wuming looked at the last king with some playfulness. The reason why the disobedient gods were called disobedient gods was that they were mentally abnormal and disobedient to their own myths. This also meant that the disobedient gods were belligerent. Whether it was Welslana, Mekhl, Athena, Perseus, Neza, Susanoo, or even Lancelot, who was the shadow of God, these disobedient gods were all belligerent. Including the god slayers who killed the disobedient gods, Warban, Luohao, and Salvatore, these three were the kind of people who would fight without saying a word. Although some god slayers were not keen on fighting, such as Yarek, Madame Aisha, and Hardadef, they still had the desire to fight in their bones. This was the constitution of the god slayers that could not be changed. As the strongest god of steel among the disobedient gods, they were the most belligerent. It was like the relationship between ordinary people and a fighting race. Just kidding. Back to the topic, as the last king of the strongest god of steel, he was neither mentally abnormal nor belligerent like other gods of steel. In Wuming's opinion, the reason why the last king fought was that he wanted to sleep as soon as possible, so that the earth would not completely lose its vitality. The last king did not want to be a hero who killed the gods. If there was a chance, the last king would choose to leave his identity as a hero. Wuming was not surprised. Because of this, there was no doubt that being the last king was very abnormal. Because he was not keen on fighting, the last king sighed and then explained. That's because of my brother. As if in response to the last king's words, a black shadow appeared behind the last king, and that black shadow simply appeared and then disappeared immediately. My brother helped me shoulder everything. He shouldered all the negative mental effects that a disobedient god should have. That was why my brother could only follow behind me, always in a state of chaos, while I became like the character in the legends. That was one of the reasons why the last king wanted to sleep as soon as possible. He didn't want to see his brother help him bear the chaos anymore. But because of the influence of the earth on the last king since ancient times, the last king became so tired. So that's how it is, the last king. I probably guessed your real name. Wuming smiled. Really? So what? Come on, let's fight. The last king was not worried that Wuming would use the last king's real name to find his weakness. However, instead of saying that he was not worried, it was better to say that the last king had a glimmer of hope, hoping that Wu Ming could defeat him. That was what Wu Ming saw from the last king's eyes. The eyes were the window of the soul. That sentence was true. So, let's start the second round. Holy light and lightning intertwined as the second round between Wu Ming and the last king began. Chapter 235. Wu Ming and the last king once again began their hand-to-hand combat. The last king's divine sword of salvation was surrounded by lightning. Each of his attacks contained the lightning of salvation. Each of the last king's attacks contained supreme power. Wu Ming blocked the attacks with his sacred sword. Each of the attacks gave Wu Ming immense pressure. In the ancient times, I killed the God-slayer with my own strength and the ancient agreement. The last king began to tell the story as he fought Wu Ming. However, since my information was exposed, it became harder and harder to kill the God-slayer, the last king lamented. After that, the gods gave me some of their god relics. The last king kept swinging the divine sword of salvation at Wu Ming while Wu Ming blocked the attacks with his sacred sword. He continued to listen to the last king's story. Every time I killed a god-slayer, the gods would give me their god relics. Just like that, I have almost all of the gods' god relics. The last king swung the divine sword of salvation hard, forcing Wu Ming to retreat. Wu Ming, who was holding his sword with both hands, sank deep into the ground. Deep scratches were left on the ground as he was forced to retreat. The combination of these god relics formed the Manchala formation. It's the divine sword of salvation with supreme power. The last king pointed the divine sword at Wu Ming again as soon as he was done speaking. Zzz, the lightning of salvation continued to surge on the divine blade of salvation. Subsequently, the lightning of salvation was shot at Wu Ming like a bullet by the divine sword of salvation. Dong. A thunderous explosion was heard. The lightning of salvation hit Wu Ming accurately. However, the last king frowned. With the support of the ancient agreement, he could clearly sense that Wu Ming was not dead because the power in the last king's body did not diminish. Moreover, the last king did not believe that Wu Ming would be killed so easily. As expected, the glow of the sacred sword was revealed as soon as the dust from the explosion dissipated. The divine sword is indeed powerful. Unfortunately, my sacred sword is not weak either. Wu Ming said. A relic-level mana gathered on the sacred sword that he was holding. The sacred sword shone brightly. The last king looked at Wu Ming cautiously as he thought that Wu Ming was going to activate his relic. A large amount of mana was attached to the sacred sword, forming a layer of mana blade that was 3 meters tall. Subsequently, Wu Ming swung it. Although Wu Ming and the last king were fighting by the sea, the last king was the last king. The sea level began to drop. Putting aside the fact that Alice and the others were trying their best to stabilize the spirit vein, the water source near Wu Ming and the last king was either evaporated by the last king's passive attack or by the mana or skills released during their battle. Therefore, there was no longer a trace of water in the area. The last king waved his divine blade of salvation, and the thunder of salvation flashed, canceling out Wu Ming's huge blade of mana. Fear the one with wings. Evil people and powerful people are all afraid of me with wings. My wings will bring you a curse. Evil people can't hit me. The moment he heard the words, the last king felt that his eyes were dazzled. Wu Ming instantly teleported in front of the last king. Wu Ming raised the 3 meters tall mana blade and swung it at the last king. The last king had dynamic vision and captured Wu Ming's movements. However, being able to capture it didn't mean that he could react. The speed was so fast that it was suffocating. The heat on the mana blade was comparable to the previous Excalibur. There was no doubt that if the last king was hit by this sword, he would be seriously injured even if he didn't die. The definition of a relic was to inject mana into the relic and shout the relic's true name to release the power contained in the relic. However, Wu Ming was thinking that if the holy sword was infused with magic comparable to the holy sword's noble phantasm without calling out the noble phantasm's true name, would the power of a holy sword without releasing its true name be comparable to the power of a noble phantasm? There was no doubt that Wu Ming's method was successful at the moment. Wu Ming first used mana and added a layer of 3 meters tall mana blade on the holy sword to expand the attack range of the holy sword. Then, Wu Ming compressed the mana used to release a relic into the mana blade on the outer layer of the holy sword. The outer layer of the mana blade was successfully transformed into a normal attack that was comparable to the release of a relic. Swoosh! With the skills and dynamic vision that he had gained from fighting countless god slayers since ancient times, the last king successfully dodged Wu Ming's fatal attack. Boom! The last king dodged, but the price was that the ground suffered another large-scale destruction. The entire coast cracked open like a turtle and then it shattered. Now, the entire ground level had been lowered, although it was caused by man-made physics. The 3 meters tall mana blade that was attached to the outer layer of the holy sword disappeared after cracking the ground. With just one attack, the mana attached to the holy sword that was comparable to a relic was instantly consumed. Although this move was quite powerful, the consumption of mana was also visible to the naked eye. Therefore, it was estimated that this move could only be used by Wuming. The relic was the trump card of the servant, the decisive weapon that changed the outcome of the battle. Therefore, the relic could not be used lightly. In the ordinary Holy Grail War, generally speaking, the servant only had one relic, but there were many servants who had multiple relics. For the servants whose magic attribute was D level or below, releasing a relic would almost exhaust the servant's mana. If it was a C-level servant, it would be in a dangerous state. When the relic was released, if it did not achieve the expected effect or if the opponent did not die, the servant who could not release the relic without mana was basically dead. Of course, there were also servants whose noble phantoms did not consume much mana, but that was a minority, and this kind of servant basically had a fatal weakness, so let's not talk about it for now. Then Wuming released his own mana and attached it to the holy sword. The last king also captured the entire process, which took less than 0.1 seconds. None of the servants could use their noble phantoms with a gap of 0.1 seconds, and it was unlikely that any servant could use their noble phantoms for more than 10 times in a row. Even if there were multiple relic, it was not necessarily the case. And there is no servant with enough mana to support all of this. Wuming, who was in the state of lightning speed, turned in an instant and slashed at the last king. Clang! The last king, who was prepared, caught Wuming's attack, and then immediately bounced off Wuming. Immediately, the last king raised the Sword of Salvation, and the Sword of Salvation emitted a dazzling light. Light of Salvation, eliminate the filth. In an instant, the lightning speed and mana blade on Wuming disappeared. Chapter 236. So that's how it is. Is this also one of the uses of the Blade of Salvation? Wuming, who exited the seraphic speed state, held the holy sword in his hand and looked at the last king. You're right. The Blade of Salvation has the lightning of salvation that can purify everything in the world. This light of salvation is another use of the lightning of salvation. After sacrificing the attack, although the light of salvation doesn't cause any damage, it can purify a series of negative effects and even eliminate the enemy's power boost. It has an extremely powerful advantage. The last king held the Blade of Salvation with a calm face. Don't say that I'm cheating. King of Disobedience, this is also a use of the Blade of Salvation. In this regard, Wuming shook his head. This is also your power. Of course, I won't say anything, but Wuming has already noticed the weakness of the Light of Salvation. As long as the Light of Salvation doesn't reach, then it can't remove the enemy's power boost. With that, Wuming began to chant a new language. Although that's the case, as long as I cover my body with the Light of Salvation, you won't be able to get close to me. But then you won't be able to attack, right? Wuming's rebuttal left the last king speechless. It can't be helped. The Light of Salvation is so powerful, but because of this, it must have a limit. If that's the case, then I'll use this. With that, the last king took out a metal disc covered with 2 golden sword-shaped runes. That was the authority of the last king that Guinevere has been holding, the arrowhead disc. The moment the last king finished speaking, the arrowhead disc emitted a light. The golden sword runes flashed and turned into 2 figures that flew out from it. I didn't expect to see you again, King of Disobedience. Last time I was completely defeated. I didn't expect to see you here. My old son didn't have enough last time. One of them was a handsome golden-haired youth riding a Pegasus. The other was a golden-haired monkey king standing on a golden cloud and wearing golden chainmail. Perseus' son Wukong. Wuming was now completely sure of the arrowhead's ability. Ever since Guinevere had absorbed Perseus, whom Wuming had killed, into the Disc of Light for the first time, Wuming had been wondering if the Disc of Light could revive the dead god of steel for its own use since it could absorb them. This was the result. The arrowhead's disc is my omnipotent weapon. Don't say that I'm bullying you, the King of Disobedience. Then the last king spoke to Perseus and the great sage, Heaven's equal. My compatriot the proud steel, please lend me a hand. Perseus waved his long robe and got down from the white heavenly horse. He took out the weapon at his waist. There's nothing we can do about it. After all, the comrade before us is very powerful. Sun Wukong scratched his ears and smiled. Since you're willing to give me a chance to kill my enemy, I don't mind helping you. Then Sun Wukong took out the Jingu Bang from his ear. Wu-Ming carefully observed the two resurrected gods. He did not believe that the last king's disc of light could revive them completely. Then Sun Wukong and Perseus rushed toward Wu-Ming. Sun Wukong arrived at Wu-Ming's side first with lightning speed. The Jingu Bang that weighed 13,500 pounds was aimed at Wu-Ming's head. Clank. Wu-Ming blocked with his sword. Then Wu-Ming released the Blade of Magic again. The Blade of Magic was used by Wu-Ming again. Wu-Ming sent Sun Wukong flying. Then a few arrows that seemed ordinary but contained divine power shot toward Wu-Ming. Wu-Ming dodged and swiftly evaded. However, sizzle, sizzle. The violent thunder of salvation hit Wu-Ming. The last king had predicted the trajectory of Wu-Ming, who was in lightning speed. Wu-Ming flew backward and fell to the ground. The ground suddenly exploded. The dust caused by the violent impact buried Wu-Ming's figure. Since you're looking for death, I won't be polite with you. Wu-Ming's voice was filled with anger as it came out from the smoke. Lightning, lightning, lightning. I'm the conqueror who can defeat thousands with white, tens of thousands with 1,000, and tens of thousands with 10,000. Now please shine brightly for me who is on the side of justice. Give me divine power. Supreme lightning, increase exponentially. The long and short needles in Wu-Ming's heart pointed to the 9 o'clock direction at the same time, activating the double incarnation state that would be unavailable for a while after using it. Countless lightning bolts as thick as buckets rushed out of the dust. One of the lightning bolts instantly arrived in front of the king closest to Wu-Ming. That was Sun Wukong. Sun Wukong had already been paralyzed by Wu-Ming's lightning aura after using double Thunder God's incarnation. I am the one who crushes all the enemies and enmity between humans and demons. That was the God of Thunder's incarnation's amplification spirit, which could increase his power again. In an instant, countless lightning pillars with a diameter of 3 or 4 meters buried Sun Wukong. Ah! Sun Wukong let out a sorrowful cry. Then the resurrected Monkey King turned into ashes. At that moment, the stone plate in Wu-Ming's heart, which represented the 9 o'clock direction of Thunder God's incarnation, emitted a red light as if a machine overheated. The lightning pillars outside also revealed Wu-Ming's figure. Then Wu-Ming looked at Perseus again. It's you? It's you? Perseus was shocked. After all, Wu-Ming could easily defeat him before. Now he had turned the famous great sage Heaven's equal to heaven into ashes. Perseus was alarmed at this moment. I will deny the sky, deny the earth, the storm will destroy everything, and the shower will cover everything. With the wind that can continue to rise until the point, combined with this supreme divine power, I will make everything in the world bow down to me. In an instant, the two needles that originally pointed to Thunder God's incarnation turned and pointed to the 4 o'clock direction of Thunder God's incarnation. What followed was a torrential downpour of wind. The violent wind blew away everything around Wu-Ming, including the ground, the air, and Perseus, who was standing not far away from the last king. The storm rolled up everything on the beach and even the dry coast, soil, rocks, withered grass, rotten trees, and everything was instantly crushed by the violent wind and turned into dust, covering the sky and the earth, falling like a drizzle. This included Perseus, who had a shocked expression on his face just a second ago. At this moment he also turned into wisps of magic and disappeared. In just a few seconds, Wu-Ming killed the two enemies he had killed before. At that time, the last king, who moved because of the wind, opened his eyes, looked at the scene in front of him and fell into silence. Chapter 237. Wu-Ming looked at the silent last king and smiled while wiping a few drops of sweat on his cheeks. Wu-Ming, who was in his human form, felt a little tired after using double incarnation twice in a row. The physical burden of double incarnation was not something that anyone could bear. Wu-Ming got his noble phantasm through his own noble phantasm. Before the noble phantasm was upgraded, the noble phantasm itself would be set according to Wu-Ming's specific situation. As the dragon of origin, Wu-Ming was a high-level existence. Although he was still a baby, he was still the dragon of origin. Therefore, Wu-Ming's noble phantasm had a great suppressive ability when compared with noble phantasm of the same level. Moreover, those noble phantasms had the ability to evolve infinitely. As a god's authority, Wu-Ming's noble phantasm was undoubtedly the most powerful noble phantasm in EX. It could be said to be the EX of EX. However, that also meant that the burden of using noble phantasm was extremely difficult for others. In terms of physical burden alone, if he revealed his true form, Wu Ming was confident that he could penetrate the earth with pure physical strength. Although his physical strength was reduced in his human form, his body was still strong. Let's look at his magical power consumption. Wu Ming, who used double incarnation twice in a row, consumed as much magical power as multiple gods' layers. For a magician, obtaining the Holy Grail represented endless magical power. Even if the previous servant obtained the Holy Grail, even if he had been using Noble Phantasm, he didn't know how long it would take to completely exhaust the Holy Grail's magical power, and that was under the premise that the Holy Grail did not automatically restore its magical power. Take the Holy Grail made by Guinevere as an example. The last king used it as a primer to restore his magical power to its full state. Moreover, because he was standing on the earth, his magical power limit was still constantly breaking through. If it weren't for Wu Ming being the dragon of origin, his magical power was almost infinite, and when Wu Ming incarnated as a servant, his magical power storage was also EX level. If Wu Ming's strongest stat was his magical power, it was undoubtedly his magical power. The level of magical power completely suppressed the sum of strength, agility, durability, and Noble Phantasm. As for luck, although that could be expressed in data, who could say for sure? All in all, Wu Ming just used 2 double incarnations. At this moment, although his magical power was sufficient, that was the first time Wu Ming felt his magical power was greatly reduced. For Wu Ming, who had never felt a lack of magical power, it was really rare. Well, but it's not a big deal. I guessed it right. You are now weak, last king. Wu Ming grinned happily. Although using the arrowhead disc can summon the dead steel, I have to give them a part of my power, and as my authority to resurrect them, they only have 80% of their power. If they die in battle, you won't be able to get back the power you gave them, right? That's right, that's why the last king didn't use the arrowhead disc. The arrowhead disc summoned steel at the cost of his own power. After these steel died, they would directly return to the mythical realm with this power. Therefore, the power of the last king was weakened. And killing these steel can't get the authority because these steel came from the arrowhead disc, the authority of the last king. Killing them only means that the authority of the last king is ineffective. It doesn't matter. Even if my power is weakened, I still have the Sword of Salvation. Moreover, I am now enough to support the power of the Sword of Salvation. The last king said indifferently after waving the Sword of Salvation twice. But you, if I'm not mistaken, you have several authorities that you can't use right now. Wu Ming frowned. Now, in addition to the incarnation representing Thunder God, which was in a red alert state, the stone plate representing Storm and Phoenix were also in a red alert state and temporarily couldn't be used. Previously, Wu Ming wanted to use double Phoenix incarnation with Blade of Mana to take down the last king in one fell swoop. However, because he was too close, he couldn't react in time, and the light of salvation from the last king's divine Sword of Salvation shone on him. Wu Ming's double Phoenix incarnation was forced to withdraw and entered red alert. However, Wu Ming now almost figured out the last king's routine, and he summarized several sets of plans in his mind. After thinking for a while, Wu Ming decided to implement one of the plans. Now, you have almost guessed my identity, don't you want to use your Sword of Spirit speech? The last king said without sadness or joy. Wu Ming just smiled at that. Although I know your identity, if I use the Sword of Spirit speech, your light of salvation will become a problem. Manchala Phalanx doesn't work on me, and the lightning of salvation can't hurt me accurately. Now, you can only limit my power with the light of salvation. So, I decided to take the simplest way. Wu Ming rushed to the last king. Thou hast violated the contract and brought sin to the world. On Sunday the sinner shall be punished. Crush his back, dig out his bones, hair and brain and trample on his blood and mud. If I am the one who cannot get close to the darkness, I will follow the Lord's words and destroy thee. God says human beings are sinful. God says human beings need to be purified. Thus the torrential flood is bestowed upon me. In the name of the Supreme King, I will grant equal relief. Wu Ming's inner pointers pointed to 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock respectively. Annihilation Avatar and Flood Avatar were activated. The sea, which was almost dried up because of the existence of the last king, suddenly soared. A huge wave of tens of meters high rose from the horizon, rushing toward Wu Ming and the last king at an extremely fast speed. Is this also a power? Looking at the huge wave, Razan said calmly. When the huge wave approached the last king discovered that the color of those huge waves was dark red, the color of blood, the color of death. That was the effect of Annihilation's ability on Flood. The power of Annihilation made the huge wave, which could easily crush steel, more violent. It could be said that if Wu Ming put Sun Wukong in this huge wave, the great sage heaven's equal would definitely turn into dust and disappear. Wu Ming suddenly exerted his strength and jumped to the top of the huge wave. Wu Ming was supported by the huge wave and looked at the last king who was waiting for him. Final king, the hero who annihilates the demon king, come and try to see if you can resist this torrential flood that is mixed with the power to destroy everything. Then the last king narrowed his eyes. That's enough for the thunder of salvation. With that, the last king's divine blade of salvation exploded with a rumble of thunder, rushing towards the monstrous flood created by Wu Ming to destroy everything. Chapter 238. The divine thunder that contained the power of salvation and the flood that destroyed everything were removed. In an instant, as if the Big Bang occurred, a violent explosion occurred at the intersection of the two. After the explosion, the rising wave summoned by Wu Ming disappeared. However, because of the intersection of the giant wave and the divine thunder, a large amount of white mist rose. The white mist covered the sky and the earth, and soon the sun was blocked. The last king's vision was also blocked. The rising white mist also contained the power of destruction, and the last king could not see through everything around him. So that's your plan. The last king couldn't help but smile. The white mist that contained the power of destruction blocked the last king's vision, and then waited for an opportunity to sneak attack the last king. However, your plan is too clumsy. You've exhausted all your tricks. Just wait for me to kill you, king of disobedience. With that said, the last king used the light of salvation from the divine sword of salvation and began to purify the surrounding mist. At this moment, a figure dashed out from behind the last king. Excalibur. Wu Ming shouted the true name of the noble phantasm, compressed the noble phantasm that was supposed to be a light cannon into the holy sword, and slashed at the last king with all his might. However, the last king's light of salvation was instantly activated, and the magical power attached to the holy sword disappeared in an instant, leaving only a sharp and sturdy sword. Boom. Puchi. Wu Ming's holy sword was caught by the last king with his bare hands, and a trace of blood was drawn from the last king's palm. Wu Ming's body was pierced by the last king's divine sword of salvation, and a large amount of golden blood spilled from Wu Ming's body. In this way you're a general, the last king said without any sadness or joy. However, Wu Ming smiled. The last king, do you think you've won? Wu Ming looked at the last king with a smile on his face. That's true. After all, regardless of whether you're the god of disobedience or the god slayer, as long as you're not completely killed, you'll definitely retaliate. As he spoke, the divine blade of salvation appeared with streaks of lightning. After all, I'm an existence that won't return until I die. Goodbye, my compatriot. The divine sword of salvation exuded an unprecedented light. There was no doubt that this blow could completely turn Wu Ming into flying ashes. It's time to end it. Wu Ming's voice came from behind the last king. Then Wu Ming, who had been pierced by the divine blade of salvation, smiled and turned into pure mana before disappearing. This is... The last king was shocked, and he quickly released the divine sword of salvation. But before the last king released the divine sword of salvation, Zabaniya. The last king's heart was affected by Wu Ming's noble phantasm. Although the last king's heart was not destroyed by Wu Ming's noble phantasm, the last king's eyes suddenly widened, and it was obvious that he was affected. At that moment, his movement came to an abrupt halt. Slayer, Flagalak. A light penetrated the last king's heart, and the last king spat out a mouthful of blood. Pfft. A black sphere fell to the ground, turned into flying ashes and disappeared with the wind. Walalala. Countless chains stretched out from the golden ripples, completely binding the dying last king. That's the slash of the war god's sword, Flagalak, the last king said. Wu Ming, who was wearing a black robe, slowly walked up to the last king. The last king, who had been bound by Enkidu, was no longer a threat. Not only was his magic power sealed, but the effect of restraining gods had also caused the last king to fall into a state of paralysis. He could no longer feel his body. Yes, but I got it from a human. Well, a very interesting human. Is that so? Feeling his life force rapidly draining away, and his unconscious body, the last king gave up on struggling. I didn't expect that you have a doppelganger authority that even I can't see through. That's right, the Wu Ming, who was pierced by the last king's divine sword, was Wu Ming's dependent avatar. It was just a doppelganger, but that doppelganger had 100% of the original's combat power. To be on the safe side, Wu-ming also used double pointer on that doppelganger so as not to let the last king see through the doppelganger. And the result was very successful. Wu-ming's black robe shattered and turned into a card, then the card shattered and turned into a little bit of magical power. Wu-ming first used Annihilation and Flood to cover up Wu-ming's dependent avatar. However, the last king used Lightning of Salvation to heat the flood containing destructive power into steam. Wu-ming thought that he might as well make use of it, and then used Create Green item to create Assassin Hassan Sabah's rank card, successfully hiding his aura. In fact, Wu-ming originally wanted to use Backlight Sword to kill the last king directly. After all, Light of Salvation could only seal skills, which Wu-ming saw from the previous battle. Wu-ming used Light Cannon, but the last king didn't use Light of Salvation. When Wu-ming condensed magical power on Holy Sword, the last king used Light of Salvation. The magical power on Wu-ming's sword disappeared. That just proved the limitations of Light of Salvation. After all, if Light of Salvation could seal everything such as skills, noble phantoms and magical power, then the last king didn't need to fight Wu-ming at all. He could just seal and kill Wu-ming directly. Did you see the limitations of Light of Salvation? Yes, I can't seal or eliminate the released noble phantoms or skills. Only something similar to enhanced status or magical power can be eliminated by Light of Salvation. It was precisely because of this that Wu-ming thought of using the backlight sword that he took from Bizet, yes, took from him. When the last king released Light of Salvation and Lightning of Salvation many times, backlight sword was already triggered. After Wu-ming played with it when he had nothing to do. He studied it when he had nothing to do. Along with his magician avatar, he successfully maintained backlight sword's activation state. Although there was no need to release the backlight sword, Wu-ming still had the attitude of helping Buddha to the west. He used the backlight sword to completely destroy the heart of the last king that had been damaged by Zabaniya. You lost the last king, no Rama. Chapter 239. As expected, you've already guessed it. Rama forced a smile. Rama, from the Ramayana, one of the two large-scale epics in India, appeared as the eldest prince of the 10 chariot kings of Ayudha. He was the 7th incarnation of Vishnu. Among the 3 Indian gods, Brahma was in charge of creation, Shiva was in charge of destruction, and Vishnu was in charge of maintenance. It was the responsibility of Vishnu, the hero, to descend to the mortal world to save the world during the end of mankind. Most importantly, Rama had the experience of killing the demon king. This also meant that he was qualified to be called the hero. When Wu-ming saw the Manchala formation, he guessed that the last king must be a god from Indian mythology. When India was cultivating the secret arts, to prevent the demons from invading, they divided the area into circles and squares called Manchala. As the last king, the ordinary god of disobedience would not be able to take on the role. Therefore, the last king could only be from the 2 Indian epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Coincidentally, the last king had the Manchala formation which contained the god relics bestowed by the gods and Buddhas in the heavenly realm. In the Ramayana, there was also a legend of Rama obtaining various weapons from the holy immortals. Behind the last king, the one who bore the shadow of madness as a god of disobedience, was probably Rama's younger brother, the 3rd prince of Ayudha, Rashmana. The bandaged man you summoned must be the white ape Nuaman who helped you defeat the demon king Rabona. This was also the reason why the bandaged man was covered in bandages and wore a mask on his face. Once people find out that the bandaged man is a white ape, the first thing they would think of would be the divine ape who helped Rama defeat the demon king. In that case, your identity would be exposed. Therefore, the white ape Nuaman disguised himself with bandages and a mask. He didn't even say a word so that you wouldn't be exposed. Rama, who was tightly bound by the Enkidu, did not say anything. His life was about to end. You're tired of being the last king, aren't you, Rama? Wu-ming suddenly asked. That's right. Whether it was from Rama's tired eyes at the beginning or the way he kept providing information to Wu-ming, Wu-ming could tell that Rama hoped that Wu-ming could kill him. This killing was to kill the last king, not Rama himself. Rama knew that Wu-ming was a god from another world. This gave Rama, who had given up on the identity of the last king, a glimmer of hope. That's right. I'm really tired of this life of constant battles. Exhaustion appeared in Rama's eyes as he spoke. Rama would not die completely after being killed. He had the absolute immortality of the strongest steel. The so-called killing of Rama was actually pushing him to the brink of death. After pondering for a moment, Wu-ming spoke to Rama. I don't know if I can free you from the curse of the last king. After all, I don't know anything about curses. After defeating the demon king Luobona and saving Sito, Rama sneak attacked and killed the enemy monkey Pali in order to save his own monkey Pali. Pali's wife cursed Rama because of this. Even if you save your wife, you won't be able to enjoy the joy of reunion with your wife. Being trapped in the identity of the last king and having to fight against the demon king on the surface, Rama would not be able to enjoy the joy of reunion with his lover Sito. However, I'll try my best to do so. After all, I hope that you won't wake up. Hearing this, Rama smiled in relief. I hope you can succeed, my comrade. Also, my former companions, please treat them well. Rama disappeared. Before he disappeared, he left behind a sentence that baffled Wuming. Rama's physical body turned into magic power and disappeared. However, the divine blade of salvation in his hand did not disappear with Rama. Instead, it fell to the ground. Wuming looked at the divine blade of salvation and fell into deep thought. On the other hand, Nuiman, Lancelot, and Guinevere were forced to separate from Zacia, Sebastian, and Athena due to the flood that was filled with destructive power. Although it seemed like Wuming had taken quite some time to kill Rama, in reality, it only took a few minutes for Rama to be killed. From the time his clone attracted Rama's attention to the time his backlight sword was activated, Wuming had used his assassin relic to delay Rama's movement. One of the two powerful and distinct auras of Wuming and Rama disappeared. Almost everyone around them noticed it. As the fog in the sky dispersed, Nuiman sensed that his companion and master Rama had left. He spoke for the first time. Has my lord been defeated? If that's the case, there's no need for me to stay on the surface. As he spoke, the bandages on Nuiman's body were torn apart. The mask on his face cracked, revealing a body of white fur and an ape's face. Subsequently, Nuiman transformed into a gust of wind and disappeared. The white ape Nuiman had returned to the myths. The moment Nuiman returned, a pike that resembled a pipette pierced through the air. Damn it, come back here. Let's fight again. Zacia waved the pipette in a rather irritable manner. Satya, who had originally wanted to take down Nuiman and make a contribution, realized that she couldn't catch him at all during the fight. Nuiman rode the wind. Regardless of whether it was his speed or explosive power, he wasn't inferior to Zacia. Although Nuiman couldn't defeat Zacia, Nuiman's harassment tactics and explosive power were enough to make her feel aggrieved. After all, Zacia wasn't a patient person. Nearby, Sebastian glanced at the irritable Zacia and shook his head helplessly. Madam Zacia, our mission is only to hold them back for Lord Wuming. There's no need to kill them. Of course, I know that. But if I kill the enemy, Lord Wuming might reward me, such as a room at night. With that, Zacia's face flushed as she fell into a fantasy. Instead of looking at Zacia, Sebastian looked at Lancelot, who had transformed from the shadow of God into the god of disobedience. Your master has already been defeated by Lord Wuming. Do you still want to continue fighting? Because Sebastian's mission was only to hold Lancelot back, even Lancelot, who had transformed into the god of disobedience, couldn't take down Sebastian in a short period of time. Lancelot rode his white horse and held his pike. After a moment of silence, he shook his head. I have already made an agreement with my beloved daughter. As long as Lord Villo wins, I will follow my beloved daughter and choose to follow Lord Villo. Wise choice, Sebastian said, then turned around and left. It's time to go, Madame Zacia, Sebastian called out, releasing Zacia from her fantasy. On the other side, Guinevere and Athena had stopped fighting. Did Lord Villo win? Guinevere asked excitedly. After all, for Guinevere, who had found his true love, awakening the last king had become an obsession. Therefore, between the last king and Wuming, Guinevere was biased towards Wuming. As expected of someone from my origin of fate. A mere godly ancestor can only be attracted to you, Athena smiled at Guinevere, who was looking at Wuming excitedly. They all came to Wuming's side at almost the same time, but because of their previous relationship, they were divided into three groups. Guinevere and Lancelot stood to the left of Wuming, Zacia and Sebastian stood to the right of Wuming, and Athena stood in front of Wuming. Athena looked at Wuming, who was holding the divine blade of salvation, and her eyes, which were filled with wisdom, flashed. Athena spoke. People of the origin of fate, are you trying to replace Rama's identity and become the final king? Chapter 240. Athena lived up to her reputation as the goddess of wisdom. She could tell what Wuming was thinking with just a glance. That was right. Wuming was indeed thinking of replacing the last king with the savior sword in his hand. Wuming had tried to destroy the savior sword earlier. Without a doubt, Wu Ming had failed. Guinevere had told Wu Ming that the Savior Sword could not be destroyed. Therefore, on a physical level, Wu Ming could not send Rama back to the mythical level. If it's my real body, I should be able to destroy the Savior Sword that has the indestructible attribute, Wu Ming mumbled to himself when he could not destroy the Savior Sword. Wu Ming, whose roots had grown in the Moon world, was close to maturity. He could do things that were out of the norm. That's making a mountain out of a molehill. Therefore, Wu Ming had the idea of replacing the last king with himself. Rama is in a state of suspended animation with the indestructible attribute of the strongest steel. The Savior Sword and the last king are one. Moreover, it's a combination of the god relics from the heavenly realm. Of course, you can't destroy it, Athena said while shaking her head as if she could read Wu Ming's mind. Do you know the identity of the last king? Wu Ming looked at Athena in surprise. Meanwhile, Athena's snake-like eyes moved slightly as a smile appeared on her pretty face. Oh, didn't I tell you that I know the last king's real name? Wu Ming was helpless. Athena's smile was clearly the smile of a successful prank. Subsequently, Wu Ming sighed and said, So, do you have a way for me to replace Rama as the last king? Athena put away her mischievous smile and put on a serious face. If it's you, I do have a way. However, you'll have to rely on your lover over there. Athena then pointed at Guinevere, who was standing on Wu Ming's left. Wu Ming suddenly understood. I forgot that as the maid of the last king, Guinevere must know the last king very well. Wu Ming looked at Guinevere. But at this moment, Guinevere seemed rather timid. What's wrong, Guinevere? Wu Ming asked concernedly when he saw that something was wrong with Guinevere. Looking at Wu Ming, who treated Guinevere as one of his own, Guinevere asked in confusion. What? Why can you, Lord Villo? Guinevere was getting agitated. To be able to ignore your hostile behavior and continue to treat you as one of us, right? Wu Ming spoke the words that Guinevere found hard to say. Guinevere looked at Wu Ming with tears in his eyes. Lord Wu Ming, as expected, Lord Villo is still the same Lord Villo. No matter which world you are in, you won't change. Lancelot was wearing thick armor as he stood behind Guinevere and comforted him. Wu Ming felt that he could be honest about the other world. As for what Rama said about me being a god from another world, he was right. However, when I came to this world, I could be said to have merged with myself. After all, Wu Ming couldn't say that it was because he came to this world that this world changed because of Wu Ming and automatically added Wu Ming's identity into the myths. Wu Ming then smiled at Guinevere and Lancelot. Although I lost most of my memories due to some reason, I still remember you. Just like Guinevere, she looked exactly the same as the Guinevere Wu Ming knew in Camelot. The only difference was that one was older and the other was younger. Moreover, the Guinevere in the Moon world was also a magician who knew some magic. Just like the Guinevere in this world, they weren't good at fighting. However, Wu Ming wasn't sure about the Lancelot in this world. After all, the Lancelot in this world never took off his helmet and thick armor. Wu Ming didn't know if the Lancelot in this world was similar to the Lancelot in the Moon world. They should be different people. After all, this Lancelot's behavior is completely different from the Lancelot I know. Wu Ming thought and looked at Lancelot awkwardly. Is there anything else, Lord Villo? Lancelot saw Wu Ming looking at him and asked. It's nothing. Actually, I just wanted to ask, is the agreement between you and the last king that you will follow me if I kill the last king? Wu Ming regained his senses and quickly changed the topic to avoid awkwardness. That's right, Lord Villo, or rather my lord King Arthur, my beloved daughter, Guinevere, will return to the king's side as Queen Arthur. As for me, I will follow my beloved daughter as the king's knight of the lake and return to the king's side. I beg the king to promise. As he spoke, Lancelot knelt on one knee and kowtowed before Wu Ming. Guinevere also looked at Wu Ming expectantly. Lord Wu Ming's queen. Satya muttered with lingering thoughts as she stared at Guinevere. Guinevere stepped back in fear. Sebastian, on the other hand, did not care. After all, it was not impossible for him to have a few more mistresses. Wu Ming looked at Guinevere's young body and her cute face that was frightened by Satya. He touched his face awkwardly. After all, kidnapping a lowly was illegal. Yes, it was illegal. Important things had to be said twice. Moreover, Wu Ming was more concerned about King Arthur's identity. Although the legend of King Arthur in this world was set as Guinevere's creation based on the Villo, Wu Ming, who knew King Arthur, felt that it was strange. However, he had to accept reality. Get up first, Lancelot. Wu Ming adjusted his tone and spoke with the spirit of a king. As you wish, my lord. Lancelot stood up and wanted to stand on Wu Ming's side, but he was stopped by Wu Ming. Wait a moment. I haven't killed the last king yet. Wu-ming raised the blade of salvation in his hand. Guinevere. Wu-ming looked at Guinevere. Your concubine is here. Guinevere bowed slightly and spoke like a lady from a noble family. Wu-ming sweated when he heard the words, your concubine. However, Wu-ming subconsciously chose to ignore these details. Can you help me become the last king? Your concubine will do her best. Guinevere looked at Wu-ming with fighting spirit. It feels like I'm raising a daughter. Then let's begin, Athena. Wu-ming stabbed the blade of salvation into the ground. Then Wu-ming looked at Athena and smiled apologetically. Athena smiled and went to Guinevere's side and said something. Guinevere's face instantly turned red. Chapter 241. Athena left Guinevere's ear, glanced at Wu-ming and then smiled at Guinevere. Although Guinevere's face was still red, he still mustered up his courage and walked toward Wu-ming. Vilo-sama. Guinevere said softly. Yes, what's wrong? Wu-ming looked at Guinevere curiously. Even a fool would know that Athena must have told Guinevere some abnormal methods to satisfy her own bad taste. I will now send you the information about the Sword of Salvation, Guinevere said as he gently jumped, hugged Wu-ming's neck and kissed him. Wu-ming looked at Guinevere, who had his eyes closed and his face flushed red. He felt the object in his mouth and hugged Guinevere tightly. There was no reason not to take advantage of it. He hugged Guinevere and began to pass the information to him. Sebastian remained calm and Lancelot was even more so. Xiaotaya took out the handkerchief that couldn't be torn no matter how hard she tried. She gripped it with both hands and bit it with her teeth, looking heartbroken. Athena nodded slightly with satisfaction. Guinevere enjoyed this rare moment of happiness, but at the same time, Guinevere did not forget to directly transmit the information about the Sword of Salvation to Wu-ming through his lips. Soon, Wu-ming and Guinevere's had separated. Guinevere's face was flushed, there was a trace of saliva on the corner of his mouth, and his eyes were full of tears. Guinevere was immersed in the intimate contact with Wu-ming and didn't react. Razin sighed and looked at Athena, who was smiling and shook his head helplessly. Just when Guinevere inputted the knowledge of Sword of Salvation into Wu-ming's mind, Wu-ming's warrior avatar at 3 o'clock in his heart automatically lit up. That meant he could use the warrior avatar directly. With the power of my words, let the justice of the world appear. Such a spell was powerful and eloquent. It was the sword of wisdom that beckoned victory. Come, the golden sword of the power of words. After that, a golden sword that looked like Excalibur appeared in Wu-ming's hand. By the way, the Excalibur, which had been transformed by the golden particles, had returned to its original state. It had returned to the appearance of meteor silver. Wu-ming swung the golden sword and slashed at the Sword of Salvation. The golden sword cut through the Sword of Salvation. However, there wasn't any gap on the divine blade of salvation. What Wu-ming chopped off was the connection between the divine blade of salvation and Rama, who was faking his death. Now, Wu-ming, who fully knew the structure of the Sword of Salvation, successfully cut off the invisible connection. Now you just need to attach your spiritual power to it. As long as you drive Rama out of the Sword of Salvation, you can control the Sword of Salvation. Athena said. In fact, the Sword of Salvation was the symbol of the last king's identity. Whether it was the Manchala phalanx or the Sword of Salvation, they were the trump cards of the brave against the Demon King. You are both Dragon Snake and Steel. You have the dual nature of Dragon Snake and Steel. You are qualified to inherit the throne of the last king. It just so happens that you, as King Arthur, are also qualified to be a brave. Whether it was the savior of Britain or King Arthur, who was known as the last king because he existed at the end of the gods' era, he was qualified to be a brave. That was why Athena said, if it's you. Because if there was a god who didn't meet the requirements of the last king, even if he knew the method, he was not qualified, and it would only end in failure. Wu-ming closed his eyes and began to gather his spiritual power on the Sword of Salvation. Be careful, after all, Rama is the master of the Sword of Salvation. In the spiritual world, Rama is likely to launch an attack on you. Be careful. Athena reminded with concern. Launch an attack? As if he thought of something, Wu-ming smiled, and then completely immersed his spiritual power into the Sword of Salvation. Everyone looked at Wu-ming nervously. Just a few seconds after Wu-ming's spiritual power completely immersed into the Sword of Salvation, the Sword of Salvation suddenly burst out with illusory light particles. The light particles turned into a human figure, and it was Rama. Thank you, my compatriot. Rama thanked Wu-ming, and then the light particles that formed Rama instantly shattered, turned into a little light and disappeared in the sky. Then Wu Ming opened his eyes. "Vilo, Sama, how is it?" Guinevere asked with concern. In this regard, Wu Ming didn't answer. The corner of his mouth curled up, and with a wave of his hand, the sword of salvation that was inserted into the ground flew into Wu Ming's hand. Wu Ming held the sword of salvation high, and countless lightning bolts burst out from the sword of salvation, as if they were raging in the sky. There was no doubt that Wu Ming successfully took over the identity of the last king. Now Wu Ming became the strongest steel, the last king, and his real name was Vilo. Although I was confident that you could successfully take over the position of the last king, I didn't expect you to be able to drive Rama out of the sword of salvation so quickly, Athena said in a thoughtful tone. Wu Ming looked at the goddess of wisdom who was lost in thought and smiled happily. Then Wu Ming said, "Rama left the sword of salvation by himself. Leave on his own?" Guinevere said thoughtfully. Lancelot didn't say anything. Left by himself? Sebastian and Zaisha thought for a while. Left by himself? Athena repeated. Then she instantly understood something. You mean Rama is tired of being the last king, tired of the life of conquering the demon king on the ground? Athena combined her knowledge of the last king with the various situations in reality. Furthermore, Athena had secretly glanced at the last king from afar. With all these key points, Athena successfully guessed the reason why Rama wanted her to leave. It was because he was tired of her. As expected of the goddess of wisdom, Athena immediately guessed the reason when Wu Ming reminded her. Looking at Athena's confident face, Wu Ming nodded. Yes, it's because Rama is tired of being the last king and destroying the demon king on the ground. In Wu Ming's opinion, a lack of fighting spirit was very fatal for a warrior. Lancelot and Guinevere both lowered their heads slightly. After all, in their opinion, they were the ones who insisted on dragging their former master into a battlefield that he didn't want to enter. Wu Ming, who saw the knot in their hearts, suddenly said, "Cheer up, my first knight." Lancelot was shocked. That's right, he was no longer Rama's subordinate, but King Arthur's first knight, Lancelot. And you, my beloved wife, don't let me see your listless side. Wu Ming gently looked at Guinevere, who was still in Wu Ming's arms. Guinevere looked at Wu Ming, who was like the brave and fearless King Arthur on the battlefield, and his face instantly turned from gloomy to happy. Yes, Sir Vilo. Chapter 242. On this day the weather was fine, and the world returned to its peaceful state. It had been a week since Wu Ming became the last king. After Rama was killed by Wu Ming and turned into the Sword of Salvation, the doomsday phenomenon all over the world stopped, and the temperature of the earth slowly dropped. Within this week, the magic societies all over the world joined forces to magically transform the global environment. After all, if nature were to recover on its own, who knew how many years it would take? It could be a decade or it could be a few decades. After a week of hard work, the world's environment had returned to its original state. As for the topic of doomsday brought up by ordinary people, the magic societies naturally used hypnosis to cover it up. Anyway, it had nothing to do with Wu Ming. Now, Wu Ming was lying on the branch of a big tree, leisurely enjoying the moment of peace. Athena appeared in front of Wu Ming without him noticing. You sure are relaxed. That's not how a warrior should behave. And this warrior even defeated the last king. Athena frowned, disappointed that Joshua did not live up to her expectations. After the battle of the last king, Athena returned from a girl to a lowly. According to her, it was to satisfy Wu Ming's inner desires. Wu Ming was speechless. This is called balancing work and rest. Wu Ming didn't open his eyes as he said casually. Athena rolled her eyes at Wu Ming, said a few words and then left. Your lovers in Europe are here. After a moment of silence, Wu Ming opened his eyes. Lovers? Wu Ming shook his head helplessly and smiled. Because Wu Ming had turned Japan into his territory, Wu Ming naturally couldn't continue to live in the villa provided by the History Editing Committee. Sayako Mikasa, who had become the leader of the entire Japanese magic world, specially prepared a new residence for Wu Ming, but Wu Ming rejected it with the reason that he was used to it. Wu Ming returned to the villa. As soon as he entered, Wu Ming felt a sense of hostility. Guinevere and Alice sat opposite each other, smiling as they conversed. Erica and Liliana, Wanli Guyoli, and Qingqiu Courtyard retreated to the side as they discussed in a low voice. I didn't expect the maid of the last king to betray him. Although I won't comment on certain things, this is indeed a little too much. No one likes a traitor. Don't you think so, Lord Guinevere? Alice maintained her perfect aristocratic smile as she looked at Guinevere. What Alice meant was that as a traitor, Guinevere shouldn't come here to humiliate Wu Ming. That's not right, Your Highness Alice. Lord Villo is now the last king. I just returned to the king's side. There's no such thing as betraying him. Guinevere maintained his aristocratic smile as he argued with Alice. Guinevere meant that he was loyal to the last king. Wu Ming was the last king, so there was no such thing as betrayal. Besides, since Lord Villo is the king, it's normal for him to have physical needs outside. Besides, I won't say anything about the king's playmates. However, as the king's wife, I have the obligation to manage those who shamelessly seek pleasure in the king's house despite knowing that the king's wife is still around. After all, one should know their place. Guinevere was referring to Alice, who was just Wu Ming's playmate. Now that the king's wife was back, she should leave. Lord Guinevere, you're too much. I don't think anyone would want to separate a married couple who is publicly acknowledged to be in love with each other. Besides, the return of the ex-wife who ran away from home can't shake the position of the king's wife, Alice retorted. What she meant was that the relationship between Alice and Wu Ming was publicly acknowledged. Besides, Guinevere, who had left Wu Ming, couldn't shake his position even if he returned. Guinevere and Alice looked at each other with fake smiles on their faces. Anyone could see the strange atmosphere between the two of them. It was why Erica and the others didn't intervene in the matter. Seeing Wu Ming enter, Wanli Guyoli and Willina of the Clear Autumn Garden noticed him first. Lord Villo, both of them bowed slightly to Wu Ming. As for the reason for such a grand gesture, it would be discussed later. My lord. Liliana also bowed. Erica smiled at Wu Ming. Wu Ming shook his head with a bitter smile. Don't do that again. You know me well, so just call me Wu Ming like before. Guinevere stood up and walked to Wu Ming's side. My king, you're here. Guinevere looked at Wu Ming affectionately. Wu Ming turned his head away awkwardly. You really can't imagine the scene of a lowly looking at you affectionately. Even though it had been a week, Wu Ming still couldn't get used to Guinevere's gaze. Alice smiled when she saw this. She then stood up and gracefully bowed to Wu Ming like a princess. Greetings, Lord Wu Ming. Guinevere looked at her angrily. Looking at such an honest and elegant Alice, Wu Ming was not used to it. Ahem, why are you here? Has the disaster caused by Rama been eliminated? Wu Ming didn't directly respond to Guinevere and Alice's actions. Instead, he changed the topic. After a week of recovery and the efforts of various magic associations, the entire world has basically recovered. Only this easternmost island can't recover for the time being because of your battle with the last king, Alice explained. Wu Ming smiled awkwardly. Because the damage caused by Wu Ming and the last king was too extensive, Japan hadn't been fully restored until now. However, because of this, some areas were turned into scenic spots by the National History Editing Committee. Their purpose was, of course, to make money. As for you, Wu Ming, after becoming the last king, won't you affect the land? Erica asked. That's right. After inheriting the position of the last king from Rama, Wu Ming, who became the last king, should have Rama's attribute of causing damage to the land. However, maybe it's because my attribute is different from Rama's. After becoming the last king, not only did I not gain the power to deal with the land and the draconic serpents, but I also gained the power to protect the draconic serpents and the land, as well as the power to deal with steel. As he spoke, Wu Ming extended his hand. A light appeared on his hand. Athena, who wasn't there, suddenly appeared in the air. She laid on Wu Ming's body with a flushed face. Athena emitted light. Everyone present could feel that Athena's power had been greatly enhanced. However, Athena seemed to have been drugged with some human society's flirting drug. Wu Ming smiled awkwardly. He then removed the light from his hand and Athena returned to normal. Following that, it was a round of staring at each other. Chapter 243. Athena looked at Wu Ming and Wu Ming looked back at Athena. I'm sorry, Athena. Although Wu Ming knew that the effect was strange, he had forgotten about it because he wanted to show off his power. Yes, that's right. I don't mind mating with you, but I'm afraid your lovers won't agree. Athena's blunt words caused the faces of the innocent girls to turn red. Willina and Liliana from the Clear Autumn Courtyard blushed and did not say anything. Erica giggled and even Alice blushed. Bo, shameless. You pervert demon king. Wanli Guyoli's face turned red as he shouted at Wu Ming. Why would he agree? Wait, why would Lord Villo want to mate with Lord Athena? What about me? Guinevere said angrily. Wu Ming looked at Athena's giggling face and knew that she was making fun of him again. Fortunately, Wu Ming had put Sebastian and Shadia back into the staff of Ainsworthing. Otherwise, if there was another Shadia, Wu Ming would really go crazy. What's going on? Why are you making so much noise in front of our king? Suddenly, a female voice sounded. It was a young girl. The young girl had the face of an angel and short blonde hair that reached her shoulders. 2 thin braids were placed in front of her chest. Her ample bosom and tall and slender figure matched each other, giving others an exceptional sense of beauty. At this moment, the girl was wearing a gorgeous maid outfit and looked like a capable head maid. "Uncle, you're here," Guinevere greeted. That's right, this girl was the Lake Knight in thick armor, Lancelot. Yo, Lord Lancelot. Wu Ming greeted her awkwardly. After all, Wu Ming did not expect Lancelot, whom he thought was a man, to be a beautiful girl. Wu Ming still remembered what Lancelot said when she took off her armor. As the tip of my king's spear, I have the use of crusading enemies for my king. Since my king has no need to go to war for the time being, I will become your personal knight and take care of my king and queen's daily life. Then, Lancelot put on the gorgeous maid uniform that looked like a princess, leaving Wu Ming dumbfounded at that time. It's too noisy. Keep quiet in front of our king. Like a real head maid, Lancelot lectured everyone, including Guinevere, seriously. Uncle. Guinevere looked at Lancelot pitifully. Now that I'm our king's subordinate god, we have to follow his orders. Even my beloved daughter can't disobey, Lancelot said seriously. All right, let's stop quarreling. Since everyone is here, I have something to tell everyone. Seeing Wu Ming's serious expression, everyone calmed down. Then Wu Ming and the others came to the meeting room. Wu Ming sat at the head of the table while Lancelot stood beside him. The others sat on the sofa beside Wu Ming. Actually, I'm preparing to leave this world. What? Wu Ming had just finished speaking when the others were shocked. Everyone calmed down. Wu Ming waved his hand and calmed everyone down. I don't know if you saw it, but when I was fighting with Rama, we used Enumalish to shatter space. There's some black matter outside the world. Everyone shook their heads. Lancelot was the only one who nodded. I've seen the dark matter. It's indeed a shocking darkness, Lancelot said seriously. Actually, one of the reasons I came to this world is for the darkness, Wu Ming said. So, Lord Wu Ming, do you mean you're going to other worlds to look for the darkness? Alice asked. Yes. I don't know why, but I have a feeling that only I can solve it. Although the feeling was disdainful to ordinary people, for experts like Wu Ming, the feeling was often right. Wu Ming, are you here to ask for help? Erica joked. It's just a simple explanation. I'm just worried that you'll cause trouble when I'm not around. Wu Ming waved his hand. Then you can rest assured. As your knight, I, Erica Brantry, am always ready. Me too, my lord. Liliana Kranikar is always ready. I wish you all the best, Lord Wu Ming. Wanli Guyoli was looking forward to it. Do your best, Lord King. Grace of the Autumn Courtyard smiled playfully. Don't worry and go. I will help you manage your kingdom. Alice smiled. Ugh. Guinevere was reluctant. Damn it. She's speaking like a matriarch. If that's the case, I shall follow my king into battle, Lancelot said from the side. I would like to follow you, Lord Villo. Guinevere looked at Wu Ming expectantly. The darkness outside the world? I would like to see how it compares to the darkness of Mother Earth. Athena was implying that she would like to follow Wu Ming. On the other hand, Erica, Alice, and the others knew that they were not powerful enough, which was why they did not say that they wanted to tag along. After all, the beings here were either the god of steel or the godly ancestor, and Erica and the others were naturally weak as humans. Furthermore, being weak could very well be a burden. Weakness was a sin. However, Wu Ming shook his head and rejected Lancelot's suggestion. No, even I'm a little afraid of the darkness. Before I investigate it clearly, I won't let anyone go with me. Wu Ming's attitude was unusually firm. Is that so? Since it's my king's decision, I shouldn't interfere as a subject. But I still hope that you can summon me in time when you need me, Lancelot said. Wu Ming certainly knew what Lancelot meant. Lancelot, who had formed a connection with Wu Ming and became his subordinate god, could naturally be summoned by Wu Ming to help. But Wu Ming might not be able to summon Lancelot in other worlds. I understand. As you wish, Lancelot. Thank you, my king. Lancelot knelt on one knee and bowed. Don't forget about me. With my wisdom, you should be able to do much better in other worlds. Athena tugged at Wu Ming's sleeve. Athena was Wu Ming's first subordinate god. There was no reason why Lancelot could be summoned but Athena couldn't. I can also help you, my Lord Villo, Guinevere said, but he still felt a little guilty. Guinevere was a god ancestor, but he had signed a master-slave contract with Wuming and became a subordinate god. Hence he could be summoned. For strength he had Lancelot. For wisdom he had Athena. Guinevere didn't seem to be of much use. Guinevere was afraid that Wuming would be disappointed in him. But a large hand covered Guinevere's head. I'll try summoning you when the time is right. Don't disappoint me. Looking at Wuming's gentle face, Guinevere felt like he had fallen. Yes, my Lord Villo. So, Wuming, when do you plan to leave? Erica asked. I've decided to leave now. Wuming thought for a while and said, looking around at everyone. I wish you success, everyone said in unison. Yes, even if it's for you, I'll succeed. Wuming smiled happily. Then the space around him rippled. Then Wuming disappeared. Then everyone go to work for my king, Lancelot said. Then everyone left the meeting room. A moment later, Angela, who had just woken up, opened the door of the meeting room and came in, rubbing her sleepy eyes. Ah, where is my lord? I can feel his aura. Chapter 244. This time, Wuming didn't enter the space-time tunnel. Instead, he came to the outside of the world. Wuming, who had transformed into the origin dragon, roamed the outside of the universe-like world. A dragon tens of millions of feet long floated here. Looking at the translucent sphere that wasn't as big as his body but was still huge, Wuming sighed. This is probably the world of the gods' layers. Although it was a translucent sphere, he couldn't see anything inside. After all, Wuming was right beside the sphere as soon as he came out. Wuming turned his gaze to the several large spheres not far away, as well as the other spheres in the surroundings and the countless spheres in the distance. Wuming's body told him that these were all worlds. So, where did the black mud go? As Wuming said that, as if in response to Wuming's words, a small group of black mud wriggled over from the other side of the Godslayer world. Wuming looked at the black mud warily. Then, on his huge dragon body, the sacred dragon mouth gathered the rainbow-colored origin fire. After the baptism of the origin moon world, Wuming also awakened an attack-type talent ability. The origin fire could be described in one sentence. Nothing can't burn, nothing can't destroy, and nothing can extinguish. Whoosh! Flames containing a strange power erupted from Wuming's mouth and instantly sprayed on the black mud. Like wine meeting fire, the black mud was burned fiercely by the origin fire. Then, the black mud was incinerated in a moment and turned into pure magic power that could replenish the outside of the world. Wuming looked at the place where the black mud disappeared, looked around, and left. Wuming went to find the source of the black mud. In every world, Wuming was like a guest in someone's home. But in the spacetime tunnel and the outside of the world where Wuming was now, it was like returning to his home. After all, the origin dragon was huge after reaching adulthood and could only survive in a place like the outside of the world. Wuming felt great as though he was invincible. After flying for a few minutes, Wuming came to a stop. Wuming looked at a sphere. Gazing at it, Wuming moved slowly toward it. Then Wuming summoned the staff of Anziergen from his body and 2 rays of light entered the sphere. The 2 figures just now were Sebastian and Satya. The world Wuming was currently in was the world of Nazalik. As it was dangerous to descend, Wuming sent Satya and Sebastian, who were still in the staff of Anziergen, back to Nazalik. Of course, Wuming also left a message for them through communication magic. Now, I just need to find the source of the black mud. Then Wuming flapped his wings again and flew further away. As Wuming moved forward using his senses, the spots of light around him gradually disappeared and the surroundings became pitch black, just like the black mud. Wuming tensed up. He had a hunch that he might be able to see his hometown this time. Wuming didn't know how long he had been flying. He only knew that he was getting colder and colder. After a while, Wuming stopped. A gorgeous mouth kept rotating, and the surrounding light softly scattered. Wuming was excited. There was no mistake, this was the entrance to Wuming's origin, which was Wuming's hometown. Although he was excited, Wuming knew that he would return to his hometown sooner or later. This was also why Wuming was so obsessed with returning to his hometown in the past, but now he didn't seem to care. However, there were drops of black mud-like substance constantly flowing out of this mouth. This was a huge scourge and he had to solve this problem. Wuming's body told Wuming so. Now, Wuming knew why this black mud-like substance had an aura similar to Wuming's origin dragon. Therefore, this black mud came from Wuming's hometown. Wuming fell into deep thought. After much consideration, Wu-ming decided to enter the origin to investigate. And so, Wu-ming plunged into the entrance to the origin. The interior of the origin was not as chaotic as the origin of the Moon world. Instead, it felt like a dreamy universe. Wu-ming looked down. Wu-ming easily found the black stream of substance at the lowest part of the origin. Wu-ming didn't care about this for the time being. Instead, he continued forward, hoping to reach the center of the origin. Soon, Wu-ming arrived at the center of the origin. However, Wu-ming discovered that apart from Wu-ming's origin dragon, there were also the auras of other origin dragons. The auras of these origin dragons were so dense that Wu-ming couldn't help but guess what had happened. Then, Wu-ming arrived at the center, laid down steadily and closed his eyes. Wu-ming began to act like the origin of the Moon world. However, this time, Wu-ming didn't just want to absorb the power here, he also wanted to get an answer. Just like that, Wu-ming's main body fell into a deep slumber. However, Wu-ming didn't notice that when Wu-ming's huge main body fell asleep, some of the black substance around him became restless. The black mud slowly gathered together and wriggled toward Wu-ming's side. A moment later, the black substance reached Wu-ming's side. When it touched him, countless lightning and holy light burst out of Wu-ming's body. Although the black mud couldn't be touched, it turned into dust and disappeared as if it had heard a miserable cry. Then the lightning and holy light fused into Wu-ming's body and continued to protect him. Because he couldn't get any information for the time being, Wu-ming decided to experience other worlds as a heroic spirit. After all, Wu-ming had the habit of traveling and couldn't stand loneliness. Because the origin of the Moon world was also in this area, and Wu-ming's martyr's palace was rather special, Wu-ming easily transferred his consciousness into his body as a heroic spirit. In Wu-ming's martyr's palace, the white-robed, golden-haired Wu-ming opened his golden eyes. When he saw his current appearance, he came to a realization. This was because other than the identity of French General Sauterlec, Wu-ming only had 3 identities that he had personally experienced. The Connaught Silver Dragon, Sirinth. The British Silver Dragon, Vilo Sirinth. There was also a powerful being of Mesopotamia, the Guardian of Uruk, the Wise Dragon who did not have a specific name but only a title. At that time, it was after Wu-ming had experienced the Uruk that he was asked by Gaia Aleya to enter this newly built martyr's palace. I wonder how they're doing. Wu-ming thought of Maeve, who had changed a lot because of him, the immature Artoria, and the tyrannical ancient king Gilgamesh. They've probably all turned into heroic spirits. After the meeting, Wu-ming decided to take a trip to the world he owed a favor to. I wonder if Arya managed to attack that parallel world. Then Wu-ming, who was sitting on the gorgeous stone chair, lost consciousness. His consciousness had already arrived on a certain card. Chapter 245. Winterwood City, a mansion located in the residential area. Mayu woke up early, changed into a maid outfit, did some simple cleaning and began to prepare breakfast. Rin and Osaka also came out from the room next to Mayu's. Strangely, Rin and Osaka was also in a maid outfit. Sister Rin, good morning. Mayu politely greeted. Good morning, Mayu. Rin and Osaka yawned, somewhat listlessly responded. After Luvia finished washing up, she came out from the room. Oh, isn't this the maid Rin and Osaka? Oh ha, Luvia saw Rin and Osaka and laughed like a queen. Rin and Osaka clenched his fist, resisted the urge to punch Luvia's face, and tried to maintain an elegant smile, looking at Mayu. Mayu, let's go prepare breakfast together. Okay. Mayu somewhat helplessly said. Since Rin and Osaka entered Luvia's house as a maid, this scene happened almost every morning. Mayu was almost used to it. Oh ha ha, oh ha ha. Rin and Osaka and Mayu entered the kitchen in Luvia's 3 queen laughs. Soon, breakfast was brought to the table by Rin and Osaka and Mayu. Luvia, Rin and Osaka, and Mayu sat together on the chairs, and began to enjoy this delicious breakfast. Luvia tasted the breakfast and her face was full of joy. As expected of Mayu, every day you can make a different country's breakfast, and it's so delicious. You're exaggerating, Sister Luvia. These are all made by me and Sister Rin. Without Sister Rin, I wouldn't be able to make these. Mayu shook her little head. Mayu is right, I really hope I can raise the salary. Rin and Osaka ate breakfast while gnashing his teeth. However, Luvia ignored Rin Enbin's words and continued her conversation with Mayu. Actually, Mayu, you don't have to be a maid. Your brother helped me to collect the cards, so I should be the one thanking you. After Wu-ming left, Mayu was brought to Luvia's residence. Because she remembered Wu-ming's words, Mayu chose to become Luvia's maid in exchange for the right to live in Luvia's residence. Of course, Even if Mayu were to become a big missy, Livia would not say anything. However, Livia was even more optimistic about Mayu now. Brother Wuming taught me not to take other people's care for me for granted. Mayu shook her head and retorted. Actually, Livia did not have to specially bring Mayu over to live. After 5 years of Mayu's teachings from Wuming, Mayu could be said to already have the necessary knowledge for a person's life. Because of Wuming's request, and because Mayu was still a child, Livia wanted to let Mayu move over. Well, after all, this is also one of Mayu's strengths. If someone can also realize this, then I'll be much more relaxed. Livia laughed. Bah. The knife and fork in Rin Enbin's hand was broken by Rin Enbin in anger. Then Livia thought of something and continued. I don't know how your brother is now. He said he would be gone for a few days, but now it has been 3 weeks. Livia complained. That's right, it has been 3 weeks since Wuming left. Because of Wuming's help, from the time Livia and the others came to Japan to the time when they finished collecting the rank cards, it only took them a week to collect all the rank cards. After that, 3 weeks had passed and Wuming still had not returned. Maybe Brother Wuming encountered some small trouble. Brother Wuming is very strong, so he will definitely be fine, Mayu said with a smile. However, although that was what she said, Mayu's worries still lingered. Well, thinking about it, after all, he is that person. Livia hadn't been idle in the past 3 weeks. Just yesterday, Livia successfully found out Wuming's real name through the Eiderfelt family's intelligence system. Mesopotamia, the most mysterious legendary dragon in Sumer mythology. It has the closest relationship to Tiamat. It has supreme wisdom and thousands of magic tricks, and it taught the most ancient Uruk Hyunryong. What a powerful background. Rin Enbin exclaimed. Then Livia laughed proudly. Just Rin Enbin, if it wasn't for me he would probably still be in the dark. As expected, victory is mine, Livia Sarinta Eiderfelt. You bastard, if it wasn't for you, I would still be able to find out Wuming's identity. Rin Enbin said angrily. Brother Wuming is a Uruk Hyunryong. Mayu repeated Livia's words and lowered her head to think. After finishing breakfast and cleaning up the dishes, Mayu said goodbye to Livia. Then, Sister Livia, Sister Rin, I will go find Ilya first. Mayu changed into Suigyun Academy's primary school uniform, carried a handbag in her hand, and bowed to Livia and Rin Enbin. Be careful on the road, Mayu. Livia and Rin Enbin both nodded. However, Mayu began to complain. Sister Livia and Sister Rin should be careful. Don't be like last time because of an argument on the road and ended up fighting. Not only did it lead to a traffic jam, you were late for school, and you were even punished by the gem master to extend your study time. As Mayu said, Livia and Rin Enbin's expression looked like it was the end of the world, unable to get up again. After Wuming left, Livia and Rin Enbin had a dispute because of the class cards. In the end, even a helicopter was involved. Of course, the helicopter belonged to Livia. Rin Enbin did not have the money to send a helicopter. Then, the furious Rin Enbin chased after the helicopter that Livia was on, and directly used some means to shoot down the helicopter, and took back 7 class cards from the unconscious Livia. In the end, Rin Enbin called the British clock tower on the other side of the world, but was told that because the gem master could not show the spirit of cooperation, Rin Enbin and Livia needed to study abroad for a year, and even the procedures were completed. As Rin Enbin crushed the phone that was hung up, angry and sorrowful cries filled the air. After that, Rin Enbin and Livia became students of Suigyun Academy High School. By the way, because Rin Enbin's funds were depleted, and because he needed to use gems, there was no job that could provide a large amount of funds. As a last resort, Rin Enbin came to Livia's house to be a maid. Then I'll leave first. Looking at the two who were extremely weak, Mayu felt that it was better to leave first. Standing at the door, Mayu was not in a hurry to find Ilya, but instead took out a card from her pocket. It was an extremely special golden class card, on it was a drawing of a dragon, and other than that there were no words. Brother Wuming. Chapter 246. The card in Mayu's hand was the one that flew out of Shua Yu's residence after Wuming left. That night, the card flew to Mayu's bed in Livia's house. While she was sleeping, Mayu discovered the card. For some reason, Mayu could sense that the card was Wuming's. Hence, Mayu had been carrying the card. Because there was no need to, only Sapphire, who had been following Mayu, knew of the card's existence. Mayu didn't even tell Livia, Rin and Osaka or Ilya. This could be considered Mayu's selfishness as a young girl. Putting away the card, Mayu went to Ilya's house across the street. Ever since Wuming left, Mayu often hung out with Ilya. It was not only because the two were friends who had fought together, it was also because Ilya was Mayu's first friend in this world. In short, the two had a very good relationship during this period of time. After greeting Sela and Ligerite, Mayu went upstairs to Ilya's room alone. Knock knock, Ilya, are you awake? The sound of knocking on the door was followed by Mayu's call. After waiting for a few seconds, Mayu opened Ilya's door. As expected, Ilya was still sleeping. Walking to Ilya's bedside, Mayu shook Ilya and called out softly, "Ilya, Ilya, wake up. We're on duty today." As if she heard someone calling her, Ilya opened her eyes in a daze. "Did you sleep too much, Ilya?" Mayu asked with concern. Ilya's confused eyes looked at Mayu. Then Ilya smiled. "Big brother. Long time no see. As compensation, let's have a morning kiss today." As she spoke, Ilya wrapped her arms around Mayu's neck and pouted her little mouth as she approached Mayu. Sigh. Mayu was a little flustered. She had never encountered such a situation before. For a moment she did not react and was stunned in place. At this moment, Ilya also realized that the person she was hugging didn't seem to be Wuming, and she woke up. There was a moment of silence. "Yo Xiaolan." Ruby flew out of nowhere and said to Mayu's hair. At this moment, Sapphire also flew out of Mayu's hair and greeted her sister. "Good morning, sister." Ah. Then Ilya yelled and ran away from Mayu. "Mayu, I thought you were Big Brother just now. That's not real. I only dreamt of Big Brother. I don't have any thoughts about Big Brother." Mayu didn't say anything and only shook her head when she saw the flustered Ilya, who was trying to explain herself but ended up babbling nonsense with a flushed face. "It's all right. If it's Ilya, I don't mind." Ilya, who was a little confused, froze on the spot. "By the way, Ilya and I are on duty today. Ilya, change your clothes first. I'll wait for you outside." With that, Mayu brought Sapphire out of the room and closed the door, leaving Ilya with a lingering look and Ruby with an infatuated blush. Shortly after, Ilya quickly put on her clothes and had breakfast. Then she went to school with Mayu. At this moment, a limousine appeared beside Ilya and Mayu. The car window rolled down and Luvia and Rin Enbin's heads popped out. "Mayu, Ilya, I have something to ask of you after school. Remember not to leave. I'll pick you up." With that, the limousine left without waiting for Mayu and Ilya to speak. Mayu and Ilya vaguely heard something like, "We're going to be late again. It's all your fault. I really don't know when Sister Rin and Sister Luvia will be able to understand how to work together." Ilya sighed. I don't think the two of them can be together." Ruby ridiculed. Mayu fell into deep thought. Seeing Mayu like this, Ilya asked curiously, "What's wrong, Mayu?" Mayu reacted and shook her head. "It's nothing. I'm just thinking about Brother Wuming." Speaking of this, Ilya instantly recalled the morning kiss incident in the morning. Her face turned red. "Mayu, let's hurry up and leave. Otherwise we'll be late." With that, Ilya pulled Mayu and started running. It's good to be young." Ruby ridiculed. "Sister, saying this will only make you sound old. Lilan, I'm still young." In the afternoon after school, Ilya and Mayu said goodbye to their friends and waited at the school gate. "Phew, I wonder how Big Brother is doing now." Perhaps because she dreamed about Wuming in the morning, Ilya suddenly said, "If it's Brother Wuming, he'll definitely be able to solve everything," Mayu said with some longing. That's right. After all, Big Brother is very strong, handsome, gentle and reliable," Ilya said happily. "Ilya, do you like Brother Wuming?" Mayu looked at Ilya and suddenly asked, Like something? How is that possible? Mayu, you really like to joke." "Wow." Ilya laughed awkwardly. Mayu looked at Ilya and didn't say anything. Ilya also lowered her head like a little girl whose secret was discovered by her good friend. Although she was just a little girl, she was just a little girl. At this moment, the limousine stopped beside Ilya and Mayu. The door opened and a pair of hands pulled Ilya and Mayu into the limousine. "Ilya, Mayu, I'm sorry for dragging you here. I'll have to trouble you now," Rin Enbin said apologetically. After that, Rin Enbin and Luvia told Ilya and Mayu about what happened. Because the clock tower called and said that the ley lines hadn't recovered yet, they didn't reject the possibility of blockages or even cards of other classes. That was why they needed Rin Enbin and the others to use the ruby and sapphire magic attire that was supplied with magic from a parallel world to inject magic power into the ley lines. In short, it's because the ley lines haven't recovered yet, so they need to inject magic power manually, right? Mayu asked. As expected of Mayu. You summed it up in one sentence, Livia praised. It's great that there's no battle. Ilya had a dispirited expression. As expected, even if she went through special training and her strength increased significantly with Ilya's personality, she still had a headache about battle. Soon the limousine arrived at a mountain, Yuanzhong Mountain. After getting out of the limousine, the group advanced into the mountain. Soon, Ilya and Meiyu, who had transformed into magical girls, followed Rin Enbin and Livia to a large cavern. There's such a large cavern here. I didn't even know about it. Ilya looked at this place with interest. As someone who had lived in this city for as long as she could remember, Ilya was shocked. After all, there's a barrier here. Normal people wouldn't know about this place, Rin Enbin said. Ilya couldn't help but recall Rin Enbin and Livia who had fallen into the bottomless swamp's trap. Then it's here. Rin Enbin walked to an empty space and stopped. Livia and Rin Enbin placed a series of gems on the ground. Then Rin Enbin took out the earthen gift needle from his back. This was a magic tool used to inject magic power into the ley lines. He inserted the earthen gift needle into the center of the magic array. Instantly, the earthen gift needle that looked like a withered branch started to grow like a tree. Ilya. Meiyu. Rin Enbin and Livia shouted. Ilya and Meiyu looked at each other and nodded. Then, with the earthen gift needle as the center, they each raised the ruby and sapphire in their hands and began to inject magic power into it. And when the four worked together to inject magic power, the card on Meiyu's body shone with golden light and swayed. In just a few seconds, the magic power infusion was complete. And at this moment, an earthquake occurred. Chapter 247. Not good. This is the magic backlash of the ley line. The magic power comparable to a magnitude of 10 earthquake began. The few people in the Yuzhong Mountains whole were affected by the magic backlash of the ley line. The ground shattered and rocks fell from the open space. In an instant, Rin Enbin and Livia were lifted up by a huge rock. Sister Rin. Sister Livia. Ilya shouted. At this time, Meiyu, who was standing next to Ilya, moved. I'll go save them, Ilya, keep an escape route. Then, Meiyu quickly jumped in the air, instantly arrived next to Rin Enbin and Livia, and hugged them. At this time, several huge rocks fell, facing Meiyu and the others. Rumble. The big hole collapsed, making a huge noise. Outside the big hole, a golden light flew out from the collapsed big hole. Ilya, Meiyu, Rin Enbin, and Livia fell to the ground. So rude, throwing a lady on the ground. Livia covered her butt and said with a frown. It hurts, what's going on? Rin Enbin complained. Brother Wuming? Big brother. Meiyu and Ilya shouted in surprise. A blond man wearing a white robe stood in front of Ilya and the others. It was Caster Wuming. Then Meiyu threw herself into Wuming's arms. Sorry Meiyu, I came back late. Wuming hugged Meiyu and said apologetically. Meiyu didn't say anything, she just silently shook her head. Then Wuming looked at Ilya, who wanted to throw herself at him. Are you afraid of me or what? Wuming said with a smile. Big brother. Hearing this, Ilya's eyes lit up, and she also threw herself into Wuming's arms. So, it's you, that magic backlash just now was also your doing? Rin Enbin narrowed his eyes and looked at Wuming. Wuming smiled helplessly. I did trigger a large amount of mana when I returned, but it wouldn't have happened if it weren't for the blockage in the veins. Wuming was right. As long as there were no blockages in the earth vein, even if more mana was injected, the level of mana backlash would not occur. You're right. Rin Enosaka turned his head away. Out of sight, out of mind. Speaking of which, Wuming, why did you suddenly appear in the big hole? Livia asked a question that had some substance to it. Wuming looked at Meiyu with interest. Meiyu lowered her head in shame. Wuming smiled and patted Meiyu's head. Before I left this world, I left a mark on Meiyu. As long as I return, I will definitely be by Meiyu's side. Meiyu raised her head and looked at Wuming in surprise. Wuming could only smile. Oh, I see, Livia said. But I always felt that you were a perverted siscon. Placing a mark on your sister's body is unexpectedly disgusting. Rin Enbin narrowed his eyes at Wuming. Wuming didn't mind at all. After all, it was just a joke. After all, Rin Enbin and the others were already familiar with Wuming's personality. They weren't the kind of people who would flatter big shots, which was why they were able to act this way. That I've been wanting to ask since just now. Big brother, who's behind you? Ilya raised her hand and pointed at the figure sitting on the ground behind Wuming like a primary school student asking a question. At this time, everyone realized that there was indeed a person sitting behind Wuming. However, because Wuming returned and Wuming's body was blocking them, no one noticed it. Sensing that he had been called, the figure turned around and looked at the crowd with a confused expression. Eh. Everyone shouted in surprise, especially Ilya's voice was the loudest, because the figure sitting beside Wuming was exactly the same as Ilya. Except for her dark skin and different clothes, she was simply Ilya herself. As if she had reacted, Black Ilya looked at Wuming with a different kind of emotion, then got up and quickly fled before anyone could react. Wuming looked at the figure with some worry, but in the end he didn't say anything. Shoyu Mansion. The house that hadn't been lived in for 3 weeks was clean. Although Mayu had moved to Luvia's house, whenever she was free, Mayu would always come back to clean up, so that Wuming could see a clean house when he came back. And Ilya, Rin Enbin and Luvia would also accompany Mayu to clean here. After coming to the living room and preparing tea, Wuming and the others sat on the still clean cushions. "Thank you for your hard work, Mayu," Wuming said while patting Mayu's head. Wuming could naturally see that someone cleaned the Shuoyu mansion almost every few days, and it was a comprehensive cleaning. "Thank you all for your hard work. Thank you for taking care of my sister. This is a token of gratitude from a brother." Wuming bowed to the group. The few who originally wanted to decline didn't say anything. Since Wuming thanked them as a big brother, it would be rude not to accept it. Hey, I've been taken care of by Mayu a lot." Ilya touched her face shyly. "Being able to become friends with Mayu and learning and growing with Mayu is the one I want to thank the most," Wuming said to Ilya with a smile. Wuming had always believed that only people of the same generation could progress together. As an elder, Wuming could give Mayu a lot, but he couldn't give Mayu friendship. In addition, Wuming and Sapphire recognized Ilya and Mayu as their masters, which was why Wuming wanted to make Mayu and Ilya friends. Magical girls were one. This sentence wasn't a joke. It's not as serious as Big Brother makes it out to be. Although Mayu is a little shy in school, she still works hard to communicate with other students. I think Mayu is already working very hard. After hearing this, Wuming heaved a sigh of relief. After all, although Mayu went to school in the previous parallel world, she didn't make many friends because of her personality. Mayu's classmates basically only knew Mayu and didn't interact much with Mayu. This was also why Mayu was so happy to meet Erica Ainsworth, who wanted to be her friend. Then, let's discuss the problem of the other Ilya. Rin Enbin put on a pair of glasses that he dug out from somewhere. "Yes, that's right. Why is there another me?" At the mention of the other Ilya, Ilya appeared serious. It couldn't be helped. No matter who it was, they would be like this when they had another person who looked exactly like them. "Then let me explain," Wuming said seriously. Chapter 248. If I guessed correctly, the dark-skinned one who escaped just now is Ilya. Hey. Everyone cried out in surprise. But Big Brother, if she's Ilya, then who am I?" Ilya said anxiously. The others also looked at Wuming curiously. "Calm down first, Ilya." Wuming touched Ilya's head. "Of course you are also Ilya, but Black Ilya is indeed Ilya." Then Wuming looked around at them seriously. "What I'm going to say next can be regarded as a secret. If you don't want to get involved, you can choose not to listen now." Then Wuming looked at Ilya again. "Of course it's the same for Ilya. If you choose not to be involved, I will help you take care of everything." Hearing that, Ilya was silent. If possible, she really wanted to return to a peaceful life, but, "I am the manager of Winterwood City, the head of the Enosaka family, and Ilya was involved because of me. Of course I, Rin Enosaka, have the obligation to understand and solve it." Young Lady Enosaka said proudly. "Who do you think I am? I am Luvia Sorinta Eiderfelt, the next head of the Eiderfelt family. How can I run away from the problem?" Luvia said proudly. "I will bear Ilya's burden with Big Brother no matter when," Mayu said firmly. Everyone? Even Ilya now understood that everyone wasn't doing this for any other reason. They merely wanted to help Ilya. Ilya wiped the wet corners of her eyes, then looked at Wuming firmly. "I've decided, Big Brother, I choose to face it." Ilya couldn't let go of these companions she met when she stepped into the magic world. Wuming nodded with satisfaction. Although he had already guessed that this would be the result. "Do you know about the Holy Grail War?" Wuming said a word that puzzled Ilya. Is the Holy Grail War a war for the cup of Jesus? For Ilya, she only knew about the Holy Grail of Jesus. Although the Holy Grail you mentioned is also the Holy Grail War doesn't really mean that. It was true that the Holy Grail had appeared many times in history. Whether it was the Holy Grail found by King Arthur's knight Galahad, the Holy Grail in the first Sumer dynasty's treasury of Gilgamesh, or the Holy Grail of Jesus, they were all Holy Grails, but the Holy Grail War refers to the war for the universal wishing machine that can grant all wishes, am I right? Rin Enbin said awkwardly. Wuming couldn't help but take a few more glances at Rin Enbin. It seems that Rin and Osaka is related to this as well. Wuming continued. Yes, in short, it's a ritual. The Holy Grail War was initiated by Yu Sanzhou. It was originally a ritual for magicians to reach their roots, but in the end, it became a war to fulfill their wishes. Wuming didn't say what Yu Sanzhou was and continued. The 7 magicians chosen by the Holy Grail fought with the servants they summoned until only 1 magician and 1 servant were left. Servant? Ilya was a little puzzled. Let's put it this way, you know that the class card seals the power of the heroic spirit, so you can understand that the servant is the incarnation of the heroic spirit. I see, the incarnation of the heroic spirit. Ilya nodded. And the Holy Grail War was held here, Winterwood City. In the city we live in now. Ilya couldn't believe it. Don't worry, Ilya, the Holy Grail War will never happen again. 10 years ago, the upcoming 4th Holy Grail War was stopped. Under the witness of the clock tower, the Holy Grail War ritual was cancelled by the Yu Sanzhou. Ilya heaved a sigh of relief. Thinking about it, with the power of the class card, if there were really 7 heroic spirits clones, this city would definitely be plunged into misery and suffering. The Holy Grail War requires a Great Holy Grail and a Small Holy Grail. The Great Holy Grail has always existed, just in the Great Hollow of the Yuanzhong Mountain, and the Small Holy Grail needs to be artificially created. Meiyo's expression was a little gloomy when she said that. Wuming naturally noticed Meiyo's expression, took Meiyo's hand and looked at Meiyu with a smile. Meiyu raised her head, looked at Wuming, and after a few seconds of silence she also smiled. Then Wuming looked at Ilya. Often the Small Holy Grail is an artificially created human, that is, the androids, and the end of these androids is usually death. Death? For an ordinary elementary school student, talking about death was a bit too much. And the one who created the Small Holy Grail is one of the Yu Sanzhou, named Einsberg. Of course, Ilya understood that the Einsberg that Wuming mentioned was referring to her surname. Ilya couldn't believe it. After all, Ilya always thought that she was an ordinary elementary school student. Although she had mysterious parents, although she had 2 nannies who looked similar to her mother, although she had a noble surname, Ilya seemed to understand something. Wait a minute, Wuming, this is a bit too much for Ilya. Rin and Osaka wanted to refute Wuming, but Wuming instantly cut him off. This is the path that Ilya chose herself, and to understand Black Ilya, you must know this first. Wuming said rather sternly. Rin and Osaka snorted a little unhappily. At this time Ilya said with some fear. Big brother means I am the Holy Grail. Yes, Ilya, you are the Small Holy Grail, and Black Ilya is the sealed personality of the Small Holy Grail. Wuming's words were like a thunderbolt that shocked Ilya's heart. I've checked your body before. There was a seal placed on your body. If I'm not wrong, the seal in your body has already been undone. As he spoke, Wuming walked behind Ilya, put a hand on Ilya's body and checked again. As expected, the seal that Wuming came into contact with had completely disappeared. Looking at Ilya, who was at a loss, Wuming smiled and knocked her head. It hurts. Big brother, what are you doing? Ilya looked at Wuming with tears in her eyes. I say, why are you so conflicted? Even if the sky collapses, there are tall people to hold it up. I'm still here. Once it's over, there is still me. Wuming's words of once it's over, there is still me struck a chord in Ilya's heart. Ilya was excited and turned around to hug Wuming. Big brother, thank you. Wuming smiled as he hugged Ilya, forming an exceptionally warm scene. On the other hand, Meiyu was a little upset when she saw this scene, but Meiyu did not say anything. At the same time, Wuming also discovered something. By the way, Ilya, when I checked just now, I found that 2/3 of your magic circuit has disappeared. Ha! Chapter 249. Rin and Osaka and Luvia were in disbelief. After all, magic circuits were the foundation of a magician. Moreover, it was an innate foundation that couldn't be improved. It was like a person who was born with the governor and conception meridians, but for some reason, one of the meridians disappeared. The consequence was a great decrease in strength. Magic circuits? What's that? I don't feel anything, eh? Ilya said in a daze. It's an invisible organ. It's like a channel that releases and stores magic power. The quality and quantity of magic circuits represent a magician's potential. After all, magicians with high-quality magic circuits and a large number of them would definitely be more powerful than magicians with low-quality magic circuits and a small number of them using normal means. The reason why it was a normal method was because many magician criminals had flaws in their magic circuits. Therefore, they used opportunistic methods to make themselves stronger than other magicians with high-quality magic circuits. Thus, they embarked on the path of crime. Moreover, there were also methods to transplant magic circuits. However, these methods were extremely rare or extremely difficult to achieve. Moreover, even if the magic circuits of others were successfully transplanted, there was no guarantee that there wouldn't be rejection. This was just like transplanting other people's organs. The body would reject the transplanted organs. If one was unlucky, they might die instantly after the magic circuits were transplanted. Rin and Osaka, who didn't believe in heresy, also walked over and grabbed Ilya's hand. He circulated his magic power and examined it. It's a lie. 2/3 of the magic circuits really disappeared. However, Ilya has always been by our side. She didn't lose her memory or anything else. How could Ilya's magic circuits disappear for no reason? Luvia analyzed. In response, Wuming brought up another topic. Luvia and Rin, take out your class cards and let me see. Although they didn't know why they had to look at their class cards, Luvia and Rin and Osaka still obediently took out their class cards. However, there were only 6 class cards on the table. What's going on? Archer disappeared. Rin and Osaka scratched his ears and cheeks as he searched for the missing class cards and said in a panic. Wuming, on the other hand, revealed an expression of truth. Based on our previous analysis, it seems that Black Ilya is indeed Ilya. However, everyone was dumbfounded. Wuming then picked up the 6 rank cards on the table. Let's take a look at these grade cards first. In the Holy Grail War, the ranks of the 7 servants included these 6 rank cards. Saber, swordsman, with the highest attributes, lancer, lancer, with the most agile, rider, rider, with a mount, caster, magician, with superb magic, assassin, assassin, with the ability to hide oneself, and berserker, berserker, with the ability to sacrifice reason to increase one's attributes. Wuming picked up the 6 class cards and explained in detail. The only thing missing is an archer with a powerful projectile or even a powerful noble phantasm. Recalling that Black Ilya was wearing something similar to Amiya, Mayu understood. Brother Wuming, do you mean that Black Ilya is the materialization of the archer class card? Wuming shook his head. To be precise, the sealed Ilya came out through the archer class card. Everyone suddenly realized. That's all for today. I need to investigate some information so that I can fully understand Black Ilya's situation. With that said, Wuming touched Ilya's head. And you don't think that you can do whatever you want just because you're the little Holy Grail. Ilya is Ilya, and this won't change. We won't change our feelings for you because of your identity. That's right, Ilya. In my eyes, you're still that reckless little brat. This won't change. Rin and Osaka said proudly. If possible, I really hope that I can leave a good impression in your heart. Ilya complained helplessly. Everyone laughed. At the same time, Wuming looked at Mayu. Wuming's lips moved slightly as if he was mouthing something. Mayu, who was extremely knowledgeable, naturally understood Wuming's lips. Wuming said, You too, my little sister Mayu. At this moment, the different feelings that gathered in Mayu's heart because Ilya was hugging Wuming had disappeared. Brother Wuming. Mayu clenched her hands and placed them in front of her chest. She lowered her head and whispered in a voice that no one else could hear. Hey, by the way, Ilya, how much longer are you going to hug Wuming? You've hugged him enough. At this moment, Ruby, who had been silent all this while, suddenly flew to Ilya's side and teased her. What? Only then did Ilya realize that she was still hugging Wuming. Big brother, I didn't do it on purpose. I don't have any other thoughts. Don't misunderstand, Ilya said with a red face. Aw, you're not frank enough. Big brother from before was like this and now big brother is like this as well. Shut up. Ilya's eyes were filled with tears. She grabbed Ruby and covered her with both hands. Wuming shook his head helplessly. Of course he could see Ilya's feelings for him. However, Wuming only treated it as a feeling of dependence. He was just an elementary school student. How would he know about love? Wuming looked outside the window. It was almost dark. Therefore Wuming spoke. Since it's already so late, why don't you stay for a meal? I've been away for so long. I don't know if your tastes have changed. No. We like everything you cook. Hurry up and go. Treat it as a welcome banquet for you, Wuming. This was the down-and-out young lady Rin Tozaka who was used to freeloading. Speaking of which, it was a first for the main character to personally cook for a welcome banquet. Although it's a little hard to say, your culinary skills are indeed not bad. I, Livia Sorinta Eiderfelt, will make do with your meal for today. This was the real young lady Livia who was drooling. Really? I'm really looking forward to Big Brother's cooking. This was Ilya who had an expectant expression. Stare. This was Mayu who didn't say anything and only looked at Wuming. Do you still want to eat omelette rice, Mayu? Wuming smiled and patted Mayu's head. Yeah. Mayu nodded. Alright. Today I'll show off my cooking skills and make you a sumptuous dinner. As for the ingredients, Wuming indicated that the transportation gate could still be used. Just like that, the Shuoyu's family held a welcoming banquet with the person being welcomed as the chef. Chapter 250. The next morning, Wuming woke up the rest of them who were still sleeping. Because they had too much fun yesterday, they ended up staying at the Shuasuki residence. My head hurts. Did I bump into something last night? Rin Enosaka held his aching head and walked out of the guest room unsteadily. Damn it. I must have stayed with Rin Enosaka for too long. Is this bad luck? Livia also held her aching head and walked out of the guest room next to Rin Enosaka's. Ilya and Mayu were already sitting at the dining table and enjoying the breakfast that Wuming prepared with love. Yes, a brother's love for his sister. You two hurry up and wash up. It's almost time for class. The two instantly rushed into the bathroom. Damn it. Blonde girl, do you need to wash up? Just pull your hair a few times and you'll be fine. You're the one. You're just a wild monkey. You don't need to dress up. Then, there was another round of chaos. Ilya and Mayu sat opposite each other. Ilya yawned and was lacking sleep. Even Mayu, who had always been energetic, was now feeling tired. Ruby and Sapphire floated beside them and chatted leisurely with Ilya and Mayu. I told you to sleep early. Now you know you're wrong. Wuming teased. Last night they started having fun when they were eating. Because they had too much fun, by the time they finished eating, they realized that it was already very late. Left with no choice, Wuming called Sila from Ilya's family and helped Ilya apply for leave. Just like that, Ilya once again stayed at the Shuasuki residence. As for Livia and Rin Enosaka, because it was already late, they decided to stay. It can't be helped. Big Brother hasn't come back for so long. Everyone misses you. Ilya ate her breakfast and her listless face instantly became extremely beautiful. Wuming smiled bitterly and shook his head. Then Wuming noticed Mayu's resentful eyes. In fact, Mayu wanted to sleep with Wuming last night because Ilya said that she could sleep with Mayu. In the end, Mayu couldn't resist the temptation and fell asleep with Ilya. Speaking of which, when did the relationship between the two of you become so good that you even sleep together? Wuming was a little puzzled. It's all right. Actually, Mayu is very popular in school right now. She's much better than when she first transferred here. Ilya rubbed her head and smiled. After all, although Mayu had begun to take the initiative to communicate with others, due to the personality that she had cultivated from the past and the temperament of an ice beauty, there were not many people who could communicate with Mayu. You don't have to force yourself, Mayu. You're already doing very well now. Although Wuming wasn't by Wuming's side during this period of time, Wuming received information about Mayu through the class card with the dragon engraved on it. This was also related to the fact that Mayu had been carrying it with her. You don't need to communicate with others? I got it, Brother Wuming. It seems that Mayu misunderstood something. Wuming hurriedly said. Actually, it's better for you to communicate with others more. After all, this is a rare school life that even I haven't experienced. By the way, Big Brother is also a heroic spirit, right? What's Big Brother's real name? Ilya asked curiously. Mayu, who was sitting next to Wuming, was also a little curious. Although Mayu knew Wuming's real name yesterday, she didn't have time to check the information. Mayu only knew that Wuming was her brother, and she never paid attention to Wuming's previous story. It could be said that Mayu didn't ask and Wuming didn't say anything. If it's the current caster, magician, class, my real name should be Hyunryong. Wuming thought for a while and answered Ilya's doubts. Hyunryong, is that a real name? I really haven't heard of anyone named Hyunryong in legend. Ilya smiled a little awkwardly. After all, she didn't know his name, so she was a little embarrassed. I can't blame you for this, it's just that Sumer Legend is not very famous in the world. After washing up, Rin Tozaka, who was dressed in formal clothes, sat next to Ilya and explained. However, half of Rin Tozaka's face was a little swollen. Fortunately, Ilya didn't notice it and asked, Sumer Legend? Is Big Brother from Sumer Legend? The great sage who taught the ancient king who has the closest relationship with Tiamat, the creator of Mesopotamia, and the most mysterious legendary dragon. Even the world's oldest epic, the Epic of Gilgamesh, has very little information about him. Livia also finished washing up and sat next to Mayu. However, the side of Livia's face was also a little swollen. Big Brother is so powerful. Ilya looked at Wuming with some surprise. Mayu, on the other hand, had heard the news from Livia yesterday, so she wasn't too shocked. Rin Tozaka and Livia looked at each other, and their gazes collided as if they were bursting with intense electric sparks. Now, Ilya and Mio were sitting across from each other at the dining table. Rin Enbin and Livia were sitting on either side of Ilya and Mio, looking at each other. Wuming sat on the other side of Mayu. Alright, if you don't hurry up, you're really going to be late. Then Rin Tozaka and Livia stopped looking at each other and hurriedly ate the breakfast that Wuming prepared. Then we'll be leaving first. Ilya and Mayu, who had finished eating, said. It's rare that I'm free today, why don't I go visit you? Wuming smiled at Ilya and Mayu. Then Mayu's smile gradually widened and she nodded heavily. Okay. About a few minutes later, a golden sports car appeared at the entrance of Swagun Garden Academy's elementary school. Although because of Wuming's superb skills, there was still a while before Ilya and Mayu's class. Ilya looked at Wuming with some embarrassment, then said. Big Brother, isn't this a bit too ostentatious? After all, Wuming's car was made by Wuming using Create Green item. Not only was its performance comparable to a high-level magic dress, but its appearance was also quite expensive. Once Ilya and Mayu got out of the car, it would definitely cause a commotion. On the contrary, Mayu was used to it. After all, Wuming was not short of money. It could be said that since Wuming adopted Mayu, Mayu had been living like a young lady. Although Wuming and Mayu often walked here in the past, that was just because Wuming wanted to give Mayu a sense of ordinary life. As long as she was with Wuming, no matter what Mayu did, she would feel happy. However, it was best to avoid unnecessary commotion. Then Wuming stretched out a hand, and several Lune runes fell on the two of them. Okay, I'll now apply the concealment rune on you. It will only last for a few minutes. If you get out of the car now, others will only treat you as passers-by, and it won't cause a commotion. You're a great help, Big Brother. After thanking him, Ilya pulled Mayu and ran into the school. Wuming still remembered Mayu's confused face at the end, and he couldn't help but laugh. At this time, Wuming noticed a magical power. Wuming looked at the top of a telephone pole, and a dark-skinned girl wearing a rather revealing black and red trench coat stood there. Ilya. Chapter 251. Black Ilya, who was standing on the telephone pole, seemed to have noticed Wuming looking at her. She immediately bent down and jumped away. Wuming parked the car in a nearby parking lot and got out. Wuming went directly to the roof of a building in the Panicle Garden Academy's elementary school. Wuming had a feeling that Black Ilya must have come for Ilya. Sure enough, Wuming discovered Black Ilya hiding on the roof of the building opposite Elias. Wuming gathered mana in his eyes and looked at Black Ilya. Black Ilya was looking at Ilya, who was in the middle of class. Wuming could clearly see a trace of envy and unwillingness in Black Ilya's eyes. Wuming exerted strength in his legs and jumped behind Black Ilya. Black Ilya quickly turned around vigilantly. When she saw that it was Wuming, her expression relaxed. What? It's Big Brother, Black Ilya said in a frivolous tone. Now Wuming was even more certain that Black Ilya was Ilya. Although her tone was frivolous, Wuming couldn't be wrong about the feeling that Black Ilya gave him. You're Ilya, right? Wuming asked. As expected of my big brother. You can see my nature at a glance. That's right, I'm Ilya, Black Ilya said happily. Wuming could see that this Ilya in front of him also had special feelings for him. So Wuming stretched out a hand. Then Ilya, can you talk to me? However, Black Ilya chose to reject her beloved big brother. Not now, big brother. Wait until Ilya gets rid of the other Ilya. That way, Ilya will be able to happily stay by big brother's side. Black Ilya said something that Wuming didn't understand. Then Black Ilya suddenly jumped away and left. Wuming watched this scene quietly. He didn't stop Black Ilya from leaving, nor did he say anything. He just thought. After a while, Wuming used teleportation portal to arrive at Zelika's room. Wuming's goal was to learn all the information about the sealed Fourth Holy Grail War. After communicating with Zelika again, Wuming obtained the information. Wuming returned to the empty Shuayu residence. After Wuming sent Meiyu and Elia to school, Rin and Luvia also went to school. Wuming had said that he would try to get in touch with the other Ilya and told Rin Tasaka and the others not to worry about it and to focus on going to school. That was why Rin Tasaka and Luvia, who were supposed to take a leave of absence, went to school. Wuming sat on the sofa with a magic book in his hand. Zelik seemed to have guessed that Wuming would come back, so he prepared this magic book that recorded all the information in advance and handed it to Wuming when Wuming came. Turning the spell book around, Wuming pondered over what Black Illyria had told him. Wuming didn't think that Black Elia was joking when she said, "Get rid of Elia." However, Black Elia seemed to want to replace Elia, so she definitely wouldn't do it in public. Elia was currently in class, so Wuming believed that Black Elia wouldn't do it. Wuming spent almost half a day memorizing all the information in the book. "Kalas, have you recorded all this?" Wuming asked. "Yes, master, everything has been recorded." A golden dragon horn accessory appeared on Wuming's head. Then Wuming's hand that was holding the magic book instantly ignited with white flames. The magic book that recorded the information about the sealed Fourth Holy Grail War was burned by Wuming just like that. If the magicians saw this, they would be devastated. After all, every magic book was a precious existence, even this magic book that could only record things was the same. Then Wuming got up and walked out of the house. Near the Cluster Garden Academy's primary school. Just as Wuming thought, Black Elia didn't do anything to Elia in public. At this moment, Black Elia was sitting on a wall, swinging her legs in boredom, thinking about something. Wuming walked over. More importantly, Wuming was holding 2 ice creams in his hand. "Isn't this Elia? What a coincidence, do you want an ice cream?" Wuming looked at Black Elia with a smile. "Big brother, are you here to stop me? I said that after I get rid of Elia, I'll listen to you obediently." Black Elia looked at Wuming with a vigilant smile. "I didn't say I was going to stop you. I just happened to run into you and I happened to buy an extra ice cream, so I wanted to invite you to eat it with me. Besides, you can't do anything right now, right? Why don't you accept my invitation?" Wuming looked at Black Illyria with the same kind expression as before. Seeing that big brother is so sincere, I'll accept the invitation." After thinking for a while, Black Elia jumped off the wall and came to Wuming's side with a smile. "Let's go sit in the park," Wuming suggested. Black Elia naturally nodded. Wuming and Black Elia sat down on the chairs in the nearby park. Because it wasn't the weekend, the students basically had to go to class and work. Hence, the small park was empty. "Here, this is strawberry flavored." Wuming put the pink ice cream in his hand in front of Black Elia. Wuming knew Elia very well. She often came to freeload on his food. She usually liked strawberry-flavored ice cream. Hence, Wuming guessed that Black Elia also liked strawberry-flavored ice cream. "You're so considerate, big brother, you even know what kind of ice cream I like to eat? You don't have any thoughts about me, do you?" Black Elia took off her clothes slightly and pretended to be seductive as she spoke. Smack. "It hurts." Black Elia hugged her little head that Wuming had hit with his karate chop. Tears welled up in the corners of her eyes. Wuming caught the strawberry-flavored ice cream that was thrown up because he wanted to hit Black Elia. Then he put it in front of Black Elia again. "You're just an elementary school student. Don't pretend to be seductive in front of me. You're still 10 years away from that body of yours." Wuming teased. "I want big brother to feed me." Hearing Wuming's words, Black Elia threw a tantrum. Wuming smiled helplessly, then put the ice cream in front of Black Elia's mouth. Black Elia took a big bite of the ice cream as if the ice cream was Wuming. "Speaking of which, I can't call you Elia. It's easy to confuse you with the other Elia. How about I call you Black Elia?" After all, Black Elia's skin was much darker than Elia's. Elia's skin was snow white, while Black Elia's skin was a healthy dark color. "Big brother is so annoying. Isn't Black Elia like a puppy?" Black Elia said unhappily. Then Black Elia's eyes lit up and she looked at Wuming with a smile. "I've thought about it. My name will be Chloe." "Chloe?" "Yes, Chloe von Erzbrunn." Chapter 252. Wuming looked at Chloe with a different gaze. Names were especially important things. Whether it was the true name of a follower, a word spirit based on a name, or a technique to curse others, a name was indispensable. Blackie gave herself a name, which meant that she didn't want to become Ilya or a substitute for Ilya. Instead, she wanted to become a person with a true meaning of existence. Well, but I can also specially allow Big Brother to call me Blackie. Blackie smiled and then took another bite of ice cream, revealing a happy expression. It's delicious. So Ilya wasn't wrong. Eating ice cream is this kind of enjoyment. Blackie couldn't taste the deliciousness before? Wu Ming asked with some heartache. If that was the case, then it was indeed a bit too much for Blackie. As expected, Big Brother already knows about me. Now there's a secret between Big Brother and me that even Ilya doesn't have. Blackie said with a grin. Wu Ming released his hand that was feeding Blackie the ice cream. The ice cream floated in the air as though a floating magic spell was cast. Then Wu Ming placed his hand on Blackie's head and gently stroked it. It's been hard on you, Blackie? Wu Ming, who already knew everything, was qualified to say this. Then will Big Brother, who knows everything, stop me? Blackie looked at Wu Ming's eyes. Of course. Wu Ming said without hesitation. Then Big Brother is my enemy. Xiao He looked at Wu Ming firmly and said in a tone that would not allow him to go back on his words. Now the atmosphere became a bit silent. However, grumble, grumble, grumble. The sound of a hungry stomach sounded and the silent atmosphere was broken. At this moment, Blackie and Wu Ming were both stunned. Wu Ming looked at Blackie's stomach with a polite smile and said, "You probably haven't eaten since yesterday." Although Blackie was similar to a follower of a job class card, it was still half of Ilya's body. It was just relying on the archer, job class card, so it naturally needed to eat. But after all, Little Black was all alone. Not to mention a place to stay, he didn't even have money. How was he going to eat? Blackie nodded. After all, I don't have money and I don't have a place to stay. Last night I even spent it on the park bench that you were sitting on. Xiao He said in a lonely voice. It's my fault. You didn't have to run away yesterday. I wouldn't have done anything to you. It's my fault for not stopping you. Wu Ming said as he let go of the ice cream in his other hand. The ice cream floated in the air like the previous ice cream. Then Wu Ming gently patted Wu Ming's head. Let's go. I'll make it up to you today. You can eat whatever you want. Really? Big Brother is the best. Xiao He happily jumped into Wu Ming's arms. Wu Ming patted Xiao He's head and was even more determined to let Xiao He live a peaceful life. In the next half a day, Wu Ming took Xiao He to eat almost all the famous food in Winterwood City. Then Wu Ming took Xiao He to the amusement park and had a good time. As for Xiao He's clothes, Xiao He easily used magic to project his clothes into home clothes. When it was almost late, Wu Ming took Xiao He back to Shuo Yu's house. Are you happy today, Xiao He? Wu Ming held Xiao He's hand and smiled gently. Yes, I'm really happy with Big Brother. At this time, Xiao He didn't look like the person who threatened to kill her. Then I'll make you a delicious dinner when we get home. Wu Ming tightly held Xiao He's hand. Big Brother brought me home to stop me from getting rid of Ilya? Big Brother is really cunning. He actually set a trap for me here. Xiao He felt that she couldn't pull her hand away and said gloomily. The two who were originally walking stopped. To be precise, it was Xiao He who stopped. Wu Ming also stopped. Xiao He, I'm not stopping you. I'm protecting you. Wu Ming turned around and squatted down, looking at the unhappy Xiao He and said, even if you took away 2/3 of Ilya's magic circuit and greatly reduced her strength, you still can't underestimate her. After all, Ilya has the help of Meiyu, Rin Enbin, and Luvia. Trifling magical girls, as long as I snatch their stellar magic staff, they will be completely useless. Xiao He said, somewhat unconvinced. As for those two idiots, I don't think they can pose any threat to me. Looking at Xiao He, who was like a proud little black cat, Wu Ming smiled and shook his head. You can't underestimate them. No matter what, they are also experienced magicians. Magicians who can survive in the magic world can't be underestimated, including the somewhat silly-looking Rin Enbin and Luvia. Although they are sometimes unreliable, if you underestimate them you will suffer a big loss. After all, the fact that the two idiots could survive in the magic world can be said to be a miracle in itself. Cough cough, then I really have to thank Big Brother for reminding me. After saying that, Xiao He instantly disappeared in front of Wu Ming. Space teleportation? Wu Ming's eyes widened. The disappeared Xiao He appeared on a wall near Wu Ming. How did you do it? I don't remember that archer, being able to teleport. Wu Ming looked at the proud Xiao He and asked curiously. Wu Ming wanted to leave Big Brother, so I was able to do this. Xiao Hei's words made Wu Ming a little concerned. Could it be Xiao Hei's original characteristic? Wu Ming thought in his heart. I didn't expect Xiao Hei to be able to do this, it's really impressive. Wu Ming pretended to be helpless and said, Big brother, you must be planning something, I won't be fooled again. After saying that, Xiao Hei was about to leave. But, clatter? The sound of chains came from all around Xiao Hei. The moment Xiao Hei was about to turn around, Xiao Hei was tied up. Big brother, do you think this can stop me? Xiao Hei said with a smile, then began to gather magical power to use space teleportation. But, did you find that you can't use your magical power, Xiao Hei? Wu Ming said with a slight smile. Damn it. Big brother, you're bullying me. Xiao Hei resisted. It couldn't be helped, who asked Enkidu to have evolved to the effect of sealing magical power. Xiao Hei, who had the skill mind's eye pseudo, naturally noticed the incoming chains. Relying on his space teleportation, Xiao Hei didn't teleport away, but accepted the binding of Enkidu. In the end, Xiao Hei didn't know that Enkidu could seal magical power, so Xiao Hei was once again caught by Wu Ming. Just accept your fate. Wu Ming said with a smile, then carried Xiao Hei, who was bound by Enkidu, on his shoulder. Big brother is a bad guy. Chapter 253. Shuasuki Residence. Ilya and the others came here after school because they received news from Wu Ming. Wu Ming and Little Black sat in the main seats while Ilya, Meiyu, Rin Enbin, and Luvia sat around Wu Ming and Little Black, looking at Little Black as if they were looking at a monkey. At this moment, Little Black and Wu Ming were sitting together with a chain on their wrists. After all, Heaven Lock, Enkidu, evolved from Enkidu's soul coiling around Wu Ming's arm. Naturally, it started from Wu Ming's arm. And Wu Ming used Heaven Lock, Enkidu, to bind Little Black, so it was inevitable that the two of them would be bound together like in the picture. Taking a closer look, you really look exactly the same as Ilya. Rin Enbin poked Little Black's cheeks and said curiously, I'm not a rare animal. Don't touch me like this, Little Black said unhappily. After all, she was forcefully kidnapped by Wu Ming. Of course she would be unhappy. Apart from the color and tone, you are indeed exactly the same as Ilya, Luvia added. Come to think of it, I feel a little awkward looking at myself, Ilya said weakly. Are you all right, Ilya? Meiyu sniffed worriedly. During the day, Ilya's mind wandered more than once and was punished by the teacher. Thinking about it, it was actually quite simple. Ignoring the sudden appearance of Blackie's doppelganger, Ilya didn't have a good night's sleep after Wu Ming told her about the Ahrensberg family. Anyone would be concerned about such a situation. It would be a lie to say that I'm fine. I really miss the ordinary life of the past. At this moment, Little Black was a bit unhappy after hearing Ilya's words. In an instant, Little Black hugged Wu Ming's arm and kept rubbing against it. Big brother, I don't have enough mana. Let's replenish it. Replenish mana? Rin Enbin and Luvia exclaimed. Ilya and Meiyu's faces instantly turned red. After being told the meaning of mana replenishment, they became very shy. If Xiao Hei is really like a class card, then it really needs to be replenished. After all, the position of the class card is basically the position of the spiritual pulse. With the supply of mana from the spiritual pulse, the servant of the class card incarnation doesn't have to worry about the consumption of mana. Luvia analyzed. No, I can't. I can't accept using my face to replenish my mana with Big Brother. Ilya said with a tone that sounded like she was about to cry. I don't think it's a good idea either, Meiyu said in the smallest voice she had ever used since Wu Ming adopted Meiyu. Wu Ming knocked on Little Hei's head. Heaven Lock, Enkidu, has sealed away all of your remaining mana. You now have enough mana to support it. Little Black became even more unhappy. This time he turned his head especially hard. Don't let me find a chance or I will definitely kill you, Ilya, Little Black said fiercely. However, Ilya was somewhat disappointed and lowered her head. Ilya, who knew a lot of things, could almost understand the reason why Little Black wanted to kill her. Little Black was probably the personality of the Little Holy Grail. This was what Ilya thought. Wu Ming touched Ilya's head to cheer her up, and then began to explain the complete story about Little Black. 10 years ago, in order to let their daughter grow up like an ordinary person, Ilya's parents sealed away the memories and abilities of the next Little Holy Grail. As an artificially created Little Holy Grail, Ilya had been instilled with all of the knowledge about the Holy Grail War by the House of Einstein barons since birth. After the Holy Grail War was sealed away forever, in order to let their daughter grow up healthily, Ilya's parents sealed away this portion of memories and abilities in Ilya's body. In the past 10 years, a new personality was successfully born. This personality absorbed the sealed memories and knowledge and watched Ilya's daily life from the perspective of a bystander. And because Ilya came into contact with magic, this seal began to weaken. It was only when Ilya received the backlash of the mana from the ley line and the mana fluctuations caused by Wuming's return that this seal was completely broken. Simply put, Little Black is case Ilya, right? Rin and Osaka pulled out a pair of glasses out of nowhere and put them on as he spoke with a serious expression. Although I don't want to admit this, it's the truth, Wuming said helplessly. It's just that this case automatically restarted during the process of being abandoned. That's what it means, Luvia added. And the reason why Little Black wants to kill Ilya is to replace her and live an ordinary life? Mayu asked. Wuming shook his head. Maybe, it's just a simple imbalance in her heart. Hearing this, Little Black lowered her head. Wuming touched Little Black's head helplessly and began to speak. You're so negative already? This isn't the style of a big brother's little sister. Wuming teased Little Black half-jokingly. Hey Little Black, do you know why I didn't hesitate to choose to stop your plan to kill Ilya? I don't know and I don't want to know. In any case, I can't escape anymore. You can do whatever you want with me. Little Black said in despair. In response, Wuming waved his hand and stopped the few who wanted to say something. You're wrong if you think that way. Little Black, feel it now. I've already removed the Heaven Lock and Enkidu's restriction on mana. You can now use mana. Hearing Wuming's words, Little Black operated the magic circuit and found that she could really use mana. Big brother, you're so confident in me? Aren't you afraid that I'll find an opportunity to assassinate Ilya after escaping? When she said the 3 words Ilya, Little Black pretended to glare fiercely at Ilya. But even so, Little Black had no intention of using space teleportation to escape. Listen to me, Little Black. Wuming removed the Heaven Lock Enkidu from Little Black. I stopped you from killing Ilya because she's my younger sister, so I have to protect her. But at the same time as Ilya's Little Black, you're also my younger sister. Thus I have to save you. Wuming looked at Little Black with a firm gaze. Wuming was also moved by Little Black's seriousness. At this time, Ilya also opened her mouth. I'm really sorry, Little Black. Ilya sat down on the ground and faced Little Black. I know about the House of Einstein Barons. Although I don't know how long you've been in my body and I don't know about the sufferings you've experienced, you still suffered because of me. No matter what, I have to bear a certain amount of responsibility. It could only be said that the girl who had experienced hardships had finally matured a little. Wuming looked at Ilya with gratification. The emotions in Little Black's eyes became even more obvious. After all, as Ilya's half-body, Little Black's character and moral character definitely wouldn't be bad. How about it, Little Black? Think about it. Wuming looked at Little Black with a smile. Little Black fell into contemplation. Chapter 254. Ilya raised her head and looked at Blackie. After a moment, Blackie spoke. Then let me ask you a question, Ilya. What question? Ilya swallowed her saliva and asked nervously. What is your current wish? Blackie looked at Ilya with a serious expression. My current wish is probably to return to my previous life, I guess. Ilya was vexed as she pondered deeply before giving her answer. Wuming wasn't surprised when he heard this answer. After all, Ilya was just an ordinary primary school student. She was suddenly drawn into the life of a magician and this caused her to be exhausted. Just like how we would usually think, how good would it be if I didn't do that thing? But, hearing Ilya's answer, Blackie lowered his head gloomily. As expected, we can't coexist. In an instant, a large amount of magic power erupted from Blackie's body. What? Ilya said in a panic. Calm down, Blackie. Rin Enbin, who could only use his hand to shield his eyes due to Blackie's super high magic power eruption, advised. Luvia and Mayu were the same. In fact, Mayu showed signs of retreating, let alone Ilya, who was just an ordinary person not long ago. Blackie, calm down. Wuming placed his hand on Blackie's shoulder. It had to be said that Wuming, who was the closest to Blackie, wasn't affected at all. Although he was still angry, Blackie didn't want to disappoint his big brother's trust in him, so he tried his best to retract his magic power. Wuming believed that Blackie wouldn't casually use his magic power to deal with Ilya, so he removed Enkidu. Blackie didn't want to disappoint Wu-ming. Blackie shifted his position angrily and leaned closer to Wu-ming. At the same time he turned his head to the side and stopped looking at Ilya. Wu-ming smiled and patted Blackie's head, indicating that Blackie didn't let him down. Blackie puffed out his chest proudly. Then Wu-ming looked at Ilya. Ilya, although I know that you didn't mean to say what you just said, do you know what it means? Looking at the serious Wu-ming, Ilya didn't know what to do. You want to return to your previous life because you realize that the world of magicians is abnormally chaotic. But this also means that you want to deny our relationship because you only knew us after entering the world of magicians. To Xiaohei you are denying her existence. Rin Enbin and Luvia nodded in agreement with Wu-ming's words. Only Meiyu didn't express anything, quietly listening to Wu-ming's speech. Wu-ming's words stunned Ilya, but she immediately reacted. No, big brother, sister Meiyu Lin, sister Luvia, I didn't mean that. Ilya looked as if she was about to cry and looked at Xiaohei pleadingly. I'm sorry Xiaohei, that's what I meant. Then Ilya really started crying. I know that I'm very clumsy. I like to sleep in the morning and often can't get up. I'm also not proficient in cooking and often act rashly. Most of the time I'm not frank. Ilya practically revealed all of her shortcomings. But I really don't mean to deny you. So please stay. I'll do my best to live with you. Please. In the end, Ilya directly bowed 90 degrees and faced Xiaohei. After all, you can't expect a primary school student to think so much. Ilya was purely reminiscing about the past and didn't mean to deny Wu-ming and the others, nor did she mean to deny Xiaohei. Wu-ming helped Ilya up, wiped her tears and looked at Ilya with some heartache. Alright Ilya, we're not saying that you've made a mistake or anything. I just want you to understand that even though there are many times in life where you wish to return to the past or start over due to regret or other reasons, in this life that you've already lived and started, there are still many benefits that outweigh the disadvantages. You've met Lin, Luvia, Meiyu and me. Even the sealed Xiaohei has obtained freedom. At that point, Wu-ming turned to look at Xiaohei who was looking at Ilya with some worry. Xiaohei who was discovered instantly blushed and turned her head away again. Wu-ming smiled and continued to speak to Ilya. During this period of time, you've indeed encountered many dangers, some of which even threatened your life. But the gains during this period of time aren't something that others can give you. In the end, Wu-ming cupped Ilya's beautiful face and looked at her slightly swollen eyes. Wu-ming said an extremely important sentence. This is the treasure of a lifetime. You have to remember to cherish it. I understand, big brother. I won't say such words again. I will cherish it. Seeing that Ilya had stopped crying, Wu-ming turned to Xiaohei. So, Xiaohei, what do you think? Facing such a situation, Xiaohei couldn't say anything. Just like that, Wu-ming specially prepared a sumptuous dinner for Xiaohei. This time, everyone didn't play until the middle of the night like last time, but, I want to live with big brother. Xiaohei hugged Wu-ming's arm with a smile, unwilling to let go. Wait, girls can't be so unreserved. Hurry up and let go of me. Ilya held Xiaohei's hand with a slightly red face and a rather embarrassed and angry expression. Ilya, you're too much. I can't live in Ilya's house. Don't tell me Ilya wants me to sleep on a park bench? That's too much, Ilya. Xiaohei's words stunned Ilya. Fortunately, Ilya was quick-witted and quickly spoke. Then you can also live in big sister Luvia's house. Why must you live in big brother's house? Ilya said with embarrassment and anger. It's fine if it's me. Luvia expressed that she didn't care. But I need to replenish my mana. Luvia's mana isn't enough for me. I'm an existence that relies on the archer class card. Only Big Brother's mana can maintain my existence. If I don't have mana and Big Brother isn't by my side, I might die. Ilya is really cruel. Is it that serious? Ilya was a little flustered. Of course, Xiaohei's claim that only Wu-ming's mana could provide Xiaohei with mana was wrong. In fact, with Xiaohei's current mana, as long as she didn't use her mana in battle, it wouldn't be a problem to maintain her existence for a few days. But right now, Xiaohei was indeed at a critical point. In addition to the mana explosion just now, if she were to fight again, she might directly disappear. Most importantly, Wu-ming said that Xiaohei was his younger sister, so it wasn't a big deal for his younger sister to live with him. Alright, let Xiaohei stay. She is indeed lacking in mana now. Wu-ming spoke up for Xiaohei. Okay, but Xiaohei, you can't mess around with Big Brother. Ilya was still a little worried. Although they had just met, Ilya could already feel Xiaohei's mischievousness. That will depend on my mood. Ah, what a sly answer. Amid the noise, the Shuoyu residence returned to its happy time. Chapter 255. The next morning, Wuming took Little Black and Meiyu from the Shuoyu residence to the Suigun Garden Academy. At this moment, Little Black, like Meiyu, was wearing the uniform of the Suigun Garden Academy primary school. This was Wuming's decision to let Little Black go to school. After all, Little Black could be very envious of Ilya's daily life. Wuming had long noticed this. As for the enrollment procedures, Wuming said that he knew some people in Winterwood City. Ahem, of course, Wuming's methods were all formal methods. Yes, that's right. Humph, 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 humph. Little Black held Wuming's hand and hummed happily. Are you that happy, Little Black? Wuming asked. It's okay. I used to watch Ilya go to school in the third person. Now that I can experience it myself, it's inevitable that I'm a little excited. Then have a good experience of school life, Wuming said with a smile. Yes, yes. I will cherish it, big brother, Little Black replied. At this moment, Wuming noticed that Meiyu, who was holding his other hand, was a little absent-minded. What's wrong, Meiyu? Wuming asked with concern. It's nothing, brother Wuming. Meiyu shook her head. Wuming smiled. You don't look fine at all. However, even if Meiyu didn't say it, Wuming could more or less guess. It was nothing more than Little Black and Ilya's identity as the Holy Grail that touched Meiyu. I will protect you. Whether it's you, Little Black, or Ilya, I have the strength to protect you now. Wuming let go of Meiyu's hand and patted Meiyu's head. Oh, Meiyu is so cunning. Big brother, I want it too. Little Black shook Wuming's hand and said coquettishly. Yes, yes, Wuming smiled helplessly, let go of Little Black's hand and patted Little Black's head. At this moment, Wuming found that the three had already arrived at school. Then Meiyu, Little Black, see you in the afternoon. Wuming waved at the two. Yes, brother Wuming, big brother, goodbye. After Wuming left, he took out his phone and made a phone call. Yes, yes, this is Einsteinberg, a lively female voice came from the other end of the phone. This is Wuming. Soon Wuming made the call. Wuming returned to Shuoyu's house, opened Dragonist, and took out some precious items that Wuming collected over the years. The reason why Wuming did that was because Wuming was going to make an item in his magic workshop. Last night, Wuming transferred a lot of magical power to Little Black by entering Magician's avatar, and also cast a blessing on Little Black. However, no matter how long the blessing was, there was a time limit. After all, Little Black was still a servant, and it was a special kind of servant that consumed magical power all the time. Although Wuming and Little Black could sign a contract, and Little Black's magical power was provided by Wuming, Wuming thought of a way to solve the problem. That was to make an item that could automatically generate magical power, turn it into an organ similar to a magic circuit, and implant it into Little Black's body. In this way, Little Black would naturally be free. It took almost 2 or 3 hours. Wuming had a stone full of Lune runes in his hand. Fortunately, this body is a caster magician class and it has the skill item creation, and I have your help, Kalas. Otherwise, it will take me a few days to complete this item. At this time, Kalas turned into a dragon horn crown with wings and floated beside Wuming. No, master, with your wisdom, even without me, you can complete it in a short time. Aha, you think too highly of me, Kelly. I do have wisdom, but compared to you, I'm still far behind. The magic attire made by Zelik should not be underestimated. Ruby and Sapphire could instantly turn an elementary school student into a magical girl who could easily suppress a first-class magician, which was enough to show the power of the magic attire made by Zelik. As a magic attire made by Zelik for Wuming, Kalas's value was even higher than Ruby and Sapphire. After all, Ruby and Sapphire were used for battle, and Kelly was a special accessory. Moreover, Kelly had evolved into a silent noble phantasm, so she was no longer in the category of accessories. Seriously speaking, Kelly could now be considered as an elf. There's still some time before Ilya and the others finish school, just enough time to prepare for the parallel world. The parallel world that Wuming mentioned was naturally Julian and the black mud born from the root. Wuming came to the door of the room in the center of the Shuoyu mansion. This room was just an ordinary bedroom, but Wuming stretched out his hand and muttered something. Then the door of the room opened automatically, revealing a futuristic-looking control room. However, the color of the control room was stone-colored, as if it was some ancient technology. This was a place that even Meiyu didn't know about. Wuming used spatial technology to superimpose a layer of space on the foundation of the original room. This layer of space was used as the control room of the Shuoyu mansion. A magician's magic workshop generally had various traps that increased the owner's attack power and weakened the enemy. As Wu Ming's magic workshop, the Shuoyu mansion was naturally not ordinary. As early as when Wu Ming built this magic workshop, Wu Ming began to build this control room. Wu Ming was not the kind of person who would not fight back after being beaten. Wu Ming set up this magic workshop for offense, not defense. There was a large platform in the center of the control room, and at the edge of the control room were unknown instruments. The upper limit was clearly engraved with lines. Inside the control room, Wu Ming took out the staff of Ain's Ol On and the nameless spellbook. Wu Ming placed the staff of Ain's Ol On in a long transparent cylinder, and the staff of Ain's Ol On floated up. The nameless spellbook was placed by Wu Ming in a groove of a control panel. Then Wu Ming sat on a platform in the center of the control room. This platform was similar to a sacrificial altar, and Wu Ming designed it to control the entire magic workshop with thought. After Wu Ming sat on the platform, he connected a line to his wrist, and a large amount of magic was transmitted to the control room. The whole control room began to operate on its own as if it had come over. The 7 gems on the staff of Ain's oral gown began to light up, and the entire staff began to glow with a myriad of colors. The nameless spellbook turned pages automatically, and countless words emerged from it and were absorbed by the lines on the control panel. Wu Ming used the staff of Ain's Ol On as a key to store the countless high-level spells in the nameless spellbook into the Shuoyu mansion, turning it into a cannon that could release countless high-level spells. Most of the magic transmitted was stored. After all, it was impossible to release countless high-level spells without the support of magic. This mobile cannon would become terrifying under the control of Wu Ming in the future. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.